year. I'm not here if that's for me.
It's 5 o'clock. Are we just about ready? Do we have anybody on Zoom?
I'm going to start with Steve.
No. I don't think so. What time did you talk to him?
Yesterday.
Oh, I talked to him a little while ago.
How are you?
Okay, everyone, we're going to get started. Good afternoon and welcome to the City of Steamboat Springs regular meeting number 2026-11, Tuesday, April 14th, 2026 at 5 p.m. And Julie, would you please take roll call?
Steve Montine,
Here.
Gail Gary, John Agosta,
Here.
Dave Barnes,
He will probably not be joining us.
He's not.
No.
Amy Dixon, here, Michael Pacino,
Here.
and Brian Swintek.
Here. Okay, let's all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. There's a flag behind me and one in the back of the room. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, our first piece of business this evening is to adjourn from our regular meeting and reconvene as the Marijuana License Authority. So I would ask for a motion to adjourn and reconvene as the Marijuana License Authority.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilor Gary, second by Councilor Pacino. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Okay, we are now into our marijuana license meeting. And we have item number 1 is a resolution denying Tumbleweed Steamboat LLC's request for a waiver of the local production requirements set forth in section 12-511 subsection 7 of the Steamboat Springs Retail Marijuana Code. So Kelly, do you want to come on down? And Dan, do you have anything to lead us off on this?
Sure. As of this weekend, the licensee had advised me that they wanted to request postponement of this hearing. The licensee's attorney is online, and I would suggest you turn it over to him to find out if that is still the case, and if so, ask him to state the grounds.
Okay, is the attorney online?
Should be
Good
Mr.
evening.
Nadav Ashner.
Hello, everybody.
Can you state your name and address for the record, please?
Yes, my name is Nadav Ashner. My address is 165 South Union Boulevard, Suite 901, Lakewood, Colorado 80228.
Okay, would you like to make a statement addressing Mr. Foot's comments?
I did seek a continuance, and I do still think that a continuance is warranted. We have some posture in the staff memo and recommendations submitted for tonight's hearing that I find concerning. The memo contains factual assertions that Tumbleweed disputes. It incorporates allegations from a pending and unadjudicated state enforcement matter that was not a matter of public record, and it did so without giving Tumbleweed notice or an opportunity to respond before now. It includes letters from Tumbleweed's 2 direct competitors, each of whom has a direct financial interest in the city denying Tumbleweed's waiver request. And it provides analysis of those letters in support of its recommendation to deny, while giving no comparable weight to the materials that Tumbleweed submitted just last week at its deadline. It was also presented to this council with a pre-drafted denial resolution, and that was not the process last year when this body heard Tumbleweed's statement, heard public comment, deliberated, and granted a waiver by motion, as opposed to what is framed as a resolution denying before any evidence has been heard or deliberated by the board. I have a number of additional items that if we move forward, I will raise, I will share with this body. But I do think a continuance is appropriate to give us adequate time to prepare, to respond and submit additional materials to the council directly responsive to what we believe to be incorrect allegations cited in the memo. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I would ask Dan if is there any reason to offer a continuance, or should we move on tonight?
Well, I don't think as a matter of due process, it's necessary to grant a continuance tonight. To the extent that the request is based on disputes as to facts, I mean, that's the purpose of the hearing, is to resolve these factual disputes. Mr. Ashner has asked for additional time to address materials that are presented to council. I mean, I think I would say that the issues that are addressed in the staff report are the same issues that were raised by the licensee last year. I think it is reasonable to expect the licensee to be prepared to address them tonight. And the list of the exhibits that are in the package is relatively short. There are letters from Tumbleweed's competitors. Yes, Tumbleweed has not had an opportunity to see those until very recently, but that's the nature of public comment. With respect to the exhibits prepared by staff, these are for the most part all documents that are Tumbleweed documents, Tumbleweed correspondence, for example. The timeline that Tumbleweed presented back in January. There is a judgment in a court case involving Tumbleweed. So I don't think as a matter of due process it's necessary for you to grant a continuance. Now, that being said, certainly you could decide to grant the continuance regardless. I do think that there is a question of whether that would serve the interests of justice and having this matter resolved in a timely fashion. Tumbleweed is and has been operating for some time out of compliance with the local production requirements. We do have other licensees who believe that that is unfair to them, and the longer of this it takes to resolve this issue, the more that they will have to, compete on this playing field. I think that perhaps for that reason, before you make a decision on the continuance request, you should see if either of those entities would like to weigh in on this request.
Okay. Is either one of those entities in the room or online?
Billow or Golden Leaf?
Yes.
You're referring to, Dan?
Correct. That's who I'm referring to.
Thank you.
Okay. Would you like to come down and make a comment? And if you could hold it to 3 minutes, that would be great.
And just regarding the hearing,
Yeah, that's all.
Extension request.
extension of the hearing or not?
Continuance of the hearing.
Hi, Charlie Petty, 795 Conifer Circle. It's my belief that Tumbleweed has had ample time to prepare. They've been in acknowledgement of this law and their non-compliance for quite some time now. I don't believe that 30 days is going to reveal any additional information. So it's my belief that we should just continue as forward.
Okay, thank you. Is Golden Leaf online? I see there's Emily Kelly. Yes. Emily, are you with Golden Leaf?
I am. I'm counsel for Golden Leaf. Leaf Anderson.
Could I-
is one of the-
Could I interrupt? I'm sorry, Emily. Could you turn your video on, please?
I am trying to.
There you go.
see me
And
now?
if you could start with your name and address, please.
Hi there. My name is Emily Kelly, 235th Street, Steamboat Springs, Colorado. I am counsel for Golden Leaf. I'm their attorney and I've been representing them since 2014.
Okay, and would you like to make a comment regarding this request for a continuance?
I just spoke with Golden Leaf Anderson, who is one of the owners of Golden Leaf, and it is our position today that Tumbleweed has had ample opportunity to handle this matter. It has been over a year, and so we would like to proceed.
Okay, thank you for your comment. All right, does anybody have any questions, more questions for Dan, or let's hear what your thoughts are on this continuance request?
Dan, my understanding is this is just about the license and Tumbleweed wishing to continue the sale without doing the 50% grow requirements.
Correct. That is the only issue presented before you tonight, is whether or not to grant or extend a waiver to that requirement.
Since it's that narrow, I see no reason for a continuance.
Okay. Other comments?
Yep, I agree.
Same.
Okay, well, let's just make sure, then let's do thumbs up for, or thumbs down for,
We need,
do we
I
need
think we
to?
ought to have a motion.
We should have a motion? Okay.
I make a motion to move to have the hearing held today and deny a continuance.
Okay, second?
Second.
We have a motion from Counselor Pacino, second from Counselor Agosta. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, we will continue on with the hearing tonight. Thank you all. Kelly, do you want to come on down?
Thank you, President Montine. Good evening, councilors. Kelly Romero Heaney, Deputy City Manager. I'm here tonight on behalf of the City Clerk's Office, which is part of the Deputy City Manager's Department. And we're here with a proposed resolution regarding a waiver request from Tumbleweed Steamboat LLC. Tumbleweed is requesting that this body, now as the Marijuana Licensing Authority, extend its waiver to the local production requirement set forth in Section 12-511 of the Steamboat Springs Municipal Code. For reference, this code requires marijuana retail store licensees to produce 50% of their product locally within the city of Steamboat Springs. This section requires council to waive the local production requirement, quote, in the event a retail marijuana store suffers a catastrophic loss of inventory due to fire, flood, or other cause beyond the licensee's control, end quote. The city clerk's office recommends that the Marijuana Licensing Authority deny Tumbleweed's request for a waiver for the following reasons. Tumbleweed has not maintained a cultivation facility in Steamboat Springs since October of 2023, and staff issued a notice of violation in October of 2024. In response, Tumbleweed requested a waiver of the local production requirement from this body on the grounds that it had experienced catastrophic loss, in part due to mold contamination that was discovered in 2022 and 2023. That waiver request was heard and granted by this body on January 7th, 2025, to give the licensee a year to come into compliance with the local production requirement. That waiver expired January 7th, 2026, and Tumbleweed has not come into compliance. Staff notes in your packet materials that they have had a number of options to comply with the local production requirement. And during this time, including cultivation at another site, the purchase of a facility, or the purchase of marijuana from other local licensees. While meeting the terms of the city's local production requirement may require significant investments, the city adopted a comprehensive regulatory framework for retail marijuana in order to protect the public health, welfare, and safety of the community, and to ensure that its impacts are offset by community benefits. It appears that Tumbleweed has made a business decision not to comply with the city's marijuana regulations, one that is not driven by catastrophic loss, but by cost. For these reasons, and those stated in your packet, the city clerk's office is recommending that the Marijuana Licensing Authority deny the waiver request. In addition to myself, your city clerk, Julie Franklin, is here, as well as Sabrina James, also with the city clerk's office. We're all available to answer questions. Of course, if you have legal or process questions, you have your city attorney, Dan Foote.
Thank you, Kelly. Do we have any questions for Kelly or Sabrina or Julie or Dan?
Well, I think I just want to start off and say the packet was very detailed this week on this. And so I went through and read everything on there, including our minutes from the last time. And so I just, first of all, not really a question because I have a full understanding. I'd hear what my colleagues have to say. It's more of a discussion, but that's because the packet was so well done. And I want to say that there was a lot of information in there and it kind of answered a lot of questions before I had to come here. So personally, I don't need to, but I would love to hear if anyone has this, and I'm sure we're going to have a good discussion.
Okay. Others?
Yeah, so I have a question. I understand the catastrophic loss in terms of the mold, but that was over a year ago. Has Tumbleweed conveyed any information about why they could not come in compliance in the past year.
Anyone?
Tumbleweed has submitted documents to the city that are in your packet. I believe they're attachment 9. There is not a sort of narrative linking those together, and I think that is probably what Mr. Ashner will be presenting later.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, we will go then to Mr. Asher. And Dan, did you want to?
I did want to mention that Mr. Ashner did request that the time for his presentation be increased. And he requested an hour. I think it is up to you to decide how to address that request. I did speak to the council president and relate to Mr. Ashner that you were perhaps open to a 30-minute presentation, but I think we should let Mr. Ashner know how much time he's going to have before he starts.
Does anyone have an objection to giving Mr. Asher up to 30 minutes?
I do.
Okay.
So I'm just curious why the information was not provided to us in advance then from Mr. Asher that he's going to review. And I've seen some of the letters that had come in on Rainbow. And I just want to make sure that we have a standard 15-minute for all folks. So why 30 minutes for this particular applicant?
Okay.
I think Mr. Ashner should definitely address this himself, but I will tell you that procedurally, we are in a little bit of a different posture in that the kinds of proceedings that usually come to you as quasi-judicial or planning matters where there has generally been a planning commission and or a director decision. And so usually there's more process that has occurred. So in that way, this proceeding is a little bit different, and I would say that would be a justification to give additional time.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with 30 minutes. I have a big problem with 60 minutes. We're here to speak specifically on the waiver and not any licensing revocation or nothing like that. We're here talking about the waiver that we gave in January of 25. And so keeping it to that, if we start to get off into tangents that have not anything to do with the waiver, I would be remiss to not say, don't waste my time. So I'm fine with 30 minutes, but don't waste my time.
And Dan, just to clarify, as you said, we're not setting any sort of precedent that outside of
No, I would not.
this proceeding.
I would not tell you next week that now you've got to give everybody 30 minutes.
Can we ask why 30 minutes is needed?
I'm happy to
Are
chime
you
in
asking?
if the council would like to hear from me.
Be great.
Go ahead.
The reason for the request for additional time is that the materials in front of you were not affirmatively provided to me or my client. We just happened to search for the agenda over the weekend, and had we not, we wouldn't have seen any of the details that are before you that you have reviewed in advance of this hearing. And so we're requesting the opportunity to respond to those materials where we didn't have them by the deadline, our deadline of April 8th to submit our own materials. Had I known all of this would be in front of this council, we would have included many additional materials in the record.
Okay. Yes.
Can we get clarification? I think, Dan, you mentioned the documents are specific to the public comment, or are there more documents?
Well, there are 8 attachments submitted by staff that are in the main packet. And 2 of those are the public comment. There's another attachment that incorporates all of the materials submitted by the licensee. And then there were 2 letters and a 3rd document that were added to the Rainbow, I believe is correct. So that, I think those are the documents that Mr. Ashner references, including the staff memo.
All right, thank
So
you.
I'm okay with 30 minutes, but I asked Council President Mentine to please make sure they stay on track and that we're only talking about the issue in front of us. I'm a little disappointed that to hear that they don't understand the process for these hearings. So I ask you, President Mentine, to keep it on track.
Yes, and I would also urge us all to be thinking of, are we talking about things that are relevant tonight? And if anybody feels we're off track, you're welcome to share that as well. So do we have a thumbs up on giving Mr. Ashner up to 30 minutes?
Yep.
Okay, have the majority. All right, Mr. Ashner, you have up to 30 minutes and you are now on. Are you sharing a screen or anything, or are you just?
May I ask, does every member on the council have a packet in front of them that they can access readily, or would it be helpful if when I address exhibits we submitted, I share my screen with those exhibits?
We all have access to all the information.
Then I think it'll just be a statement, and I don't believe I'll need to share anything. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, thanks everyone. Good evening. Again, my name is Nadav Ashner. I'm an attorney representing Tumbleweed Steamboat. I appreciate your time today. We're here because Tumbleweed has been unable to meet the 50% local sourcing requirement under section 12-511, subsection 7 of the Steamboat Municipal Code. And we are asking this council to grant a waiver of that requirement through January 1 of 2027. I want to start with a few pieces of context that I think will help frame what you're being asked to decide today. First, this body granted Tumbleweed a waiver last year. The circumstances that led to that waiver have not materially changed. And if anything, the constraints on Tumbleweed's ability to source locally have tightened for reasons that I'll explain in a couple of minutes. Second, the ordinance itself anticipates situations just like this. Subsection 7 expressly provides for a waiver where a licensee's inability to comply is due to causes beyond its control. That provision is in there because the council that enacted this legislation understood that a 50% local sourcing requirement only works if there's sufficient local supply to support it. And where there isn't, a waiver is the appropriate and in fact, the intended remedy. Third, the rule itself sunsets entirely on January 1st of 2027, which is less than 9 months from now. So effectively, we're asking for relief through the end of a rule that the city has already decided to retire. As I mentioned before, when you asked for the basis for the continuance, the posture of the memo submitted for tonight was alarming to us. It contains factual assertions that we dispute, that we do not believe are actually relevant to what this body is deciding tonight. And it deviates from the process that took place last year. And again, those materials were not given to us affirmatively. We only found them because we were proactive in looking for this agenda. As mentioned multiple times now, I submitted a letter addressed to Mr. Foote over the weekend on Saturday evening requesting that continuance. He declined. I've renewed the request. I understand this board wants to proceed. You know, we're not asking to avoid this hearing. We're just asking for a fair one. There's a bit of a broader procedural concern here as well. Just a few weeks ago, the city filed a petition before an independently appointed hearing officer seeking to deny Tumbleweed's renewal applications. That formal proceeding is governed by the city's municipal code, which affords procedural protections for both sides. The staff memo asks this council to resolve many of those same factual disputes informally in tonight's waiver hearing and without those protections in place. So these disputed issues should be adjudicated in the formal proceedings the city itself chose to invoke and not pre-decided here in a context where we haven't had an opportunity to prepare responsive materials, seek discovery, or subpoena or cross-examine witnesses to challenge the memo's factual assertions. On that note, I'd like to draw your attention to a particular attachment to the memo. It's attachment 5. It's a letter from Gatsby Holdings LLC. They do business as Billow Premium Cannabis. They're one of 3 cannabis licensees in the city. Its owners submitted a letter directly to Mr. Foote dated February 4th of this year. And the opening line of that letter reads, "Thank you for your time last week with a quick update regarding license status for Tumbleweed. Per our discussion, this document summarizes key points regarding Tumbleweed's compliance with the vertical integration city code." End quote. The staff memo and a letter that Mr. Foote sent me yesterday, which I believe is in the packet in front of you, identify this attachment as public comment. The Tumbleweed first made its request for a waiver on January 22nd of this year, and city staff did not inform us of today's hearing until February 27th. Public comment is a comment at a noticed public hearing where all parties have an equal opportunity to participate. Billow's letter was sent to city staff 23 days before Tumbleweed was ever informed that any proceeding was underway. Evidently, the city attorney was meeting privately with one of Tumbleweed's competitors to discuss the ramifications of an adverse determination to Tumbleweed's license weeks before Tumbleweed knew it would have this hearing. Whatever label is ultimately applied to it, the letter is advocacy from our competitor submitted privately to city staff before a hearing was noticed and before we had an opportunity to respond. That same letter asks this city, if Tumbleweed's license is not renewed, to allow Billow to open a second retail store at Tumbleweed's current location. One of the signatories to that letter, John Petty, who just spoke a moment ago, sat in this room last year at the waiver hearing and spoke in support of Tumbleweed's waiver. He's now asking the city to give his company Tumbleweed space and to modify other city ordinances to allow Billow to operate a second dispensary. I raise this because council should weigh the memo's conclusions and recommendations with full awareness of who had city staff's ear before the memo was written. And I want to now address some of the factual errors in the memo and its attachments as we go. So we're here because Tumbleweed can't currently cultivate or manufacture its own product within Steamboat Springs city limits. That was the case last year when the council granted a waiver, and it remains equally true today. We've been searching actively for a location to change that reality. Since early 2025, in fact, I think since later, maybe 23 or even 24, we've been working, Tumbleweed's been working with Chris Sias, who's a licensed commercial real estate broker, and he's been operating in the Steamboat Springs market since 2017. You can refer to the first 4 exhibits that we submitted in the packet. Exhibit 1 is a letter from Mr. Sias that he wrote in advance of last year's hearing, in which he explained the challenges in locating viable commercial space in Steamboat. I believe the council has all read it, so I won't quote from it. Exhibits 2 and 3 and 4 are email exchanges inquiring about cultivation and manufacturing locations. Mr. Sias's response to our emails and our phone inquiries has been consistent. He has not found a suitable space available for marijuana cultivation or manufacturing in Steamboat Springs. Warehouse prices have increased substantially since the ordinance was written 8 years ago. Rents are up, and owners associations are prohibiting cannabis-related uses in their buildings. I want to note something here that I raised in last year's record. In October of 2023, Madison Marzario, the owner's daughter and someone who's long been helping manage Tumbleweed Steamboat, sent an email directly to the city clerk's office asking essentially if there is nowhere in Steamboat for Tumbleweed to operate a cultivation facility, what should they do to comply with the local source rule? Madison didn't receive a response, but Tumbleweed's licenses were renewed a few months later with no further comment or inquiry from the city. The city raised the non-compliance with local source rules later in 2024, and that ultimately resulted in Tumbleweed requesting the hearing last year and this body granting a waiver last year. But the issues affecting Tumbleweed's ability to source enough product to comply with the rule just haven't resolved since then. The staff memo argues that Tumbleweed misrepresented facts in January 2025 by attributing cultivation facility closures to its predecessors. And I know that council members have reviewed that in advance of today's hearing, so I want to address that directly, briefly, before going into some of the other efforts we've taken to comply. This business initially held 12 grow licenses at 6 different facilities, and all but one of them were in the same complex with the same landlord. Some of them were shut down in 2019 and 2020 due to mold. And when we took ownership, we learned that some of the facilities we'd taken over had serious environmental problems as well that were not disclosed to us. We learned that the prior owners were manipulating test samples to pass testing, and that is not our practice. And so when we took over, we shut that practice down, and we learned that it was practically impossible to cultivate compliant product. So we made a very difficult decision to shut down facilities in 2020 and 2021 because of mold and other environmental hazards. In 2021, however, the landlord for all but two of the remaining cultivation sites sent us notices of non-renewal. And so even if we had wanted to renew some of these licenses, these leases at that time in 2021. We couldn't because our landlord said, we're done here. The landlord wanted to renovate the properties and turn them into luxury
May I
apartments.
interject? We are rehashing information that was presented over a year ago. I was not on the council, but I read all the material and we're familiar with the past history. We want to understand why you want a waiver after you've had a year waiver.
Respectfully, sir, I will address that, I promise, but the memo asserts that we made intentional misrepresentations to this body, and I think that warrants a little bit of time to explain what I think the record shows and what actually happened. But I am almost done with this little bit, so if you'll bear with me for just 1 or 2 more minutes, I'll be on to the next piece. On the manufacturing side, there were 2 separate events outside of our control that caused us to lose that vertical. First was that the original landlord, who was the same landlord for most of these grow facilities, declined to renew the lease, sent us a notice of non-renewal in 2021. That forced Tumbleweed to relocate. They went through a lengthy and expensive change of location process. And then at the new location, prior to the termination of the lease at the end of 2023, the landlord sold the building and told us to vacate. So yes, Tumbleweed shut down some facilities after they took ownership, but I don't believe the transcript of last year is in any way inconsistent with these facts. And despite the city's characterizations, remediation was just not an option available to us at the time, and it's not an option available to us now. And the non-renewal of our leases was not voluntary, in any legal sense or meaningful sense of the word. We kept the city informed of these developments, and through that October email from Madison Marzario, we directly inquired about the local source rule. To the extent this council is inclined to credit the city's misrepresentation narrative, we'd welcome the opportunity to provide a summary of all of the leases, each facility, each termination date, and each reason for termination, so that this body can evaluate the full picture rather than rely on the staff memo's account. But while we believe the misrepresentation framing to be incorrect, it also, I think, misses the point. The question before this council is not who managed exits from those facilities. It's why Tumbleweed has no production capacity today. And the problem was always the mold, and that predated our ownership. And so the answer is the same regardless of what happened in 2019 through 2021. The staff memo itself acknowledges this. If you look at section 3 on page 3, staff, quote, recommends that council focus on the closure of Tumbleweed's cultivation facilities in 2022 and 2023 due to mold contamination, end quote. The memo states that mold, quote, could be viewed as a catastrophic loss beyond Tumbleweed's control, and that this loss may have justified a temporary waiver for Tumbleweed to restart its cultivation operations or find a local source for its product, end quote. These are the city's own words, the staff's own words and recommendations. And the 2025 waiver was justified on exactly those grounds, and the circumstances that justified it then haven't changed. In 2022, focusing on those 2 years, Tumbleweed lost its cultivation facility at 2835 Downhill Plaza, Unit 601, after receiving non-renewal notice from the landlord. It was not our choice. We were told to leave. In 2023, they lost the facility on 2005 13th Street because they couldn't afford to remedy environmental hazards that were inherited in the building that it took over at the time of the closing of its purchase. There's one more point that bears here on the question of waiver, and that is that the city clerk confirmed last year that directly in response to a question from Council Member McGinley, that there was no enforcement of this ordinance prior to 2023. So for the 7 years after it was enacted, the city didn't enforce it. They reported that they were laser focused on licensing, renewals, and compliance, and that the ordinance wasn't at the forefront of their minds. But in their memo, they repeatedly discuss conduct that predate their initial enforcement of the rule. And I think that's relevant context for evaluating our compliance history in the face of the accusations in the memo. The memo itself now offers this council 4 options that Tumbleweed had and has to comply with the sourcing requirement. The first is to remediate the mold contamination in its cultivation facilities in 2023. The second is to commence cultivation at a new site. The third is to purchase a site for a cultivation facility. And the fourth is to purchase from local licensees. So I want to address each of those directly. On remediation in 2023, let's be very clear about what that means. The mold was not surface mold. Mold was in the walls. It was in the insulation. It was in the venting, under the tiles. This wasn't a cosmetic issue. It required substantial demolition and rebuilding. In fact, the landlord for those facilities, after terminating the leases, ultimately did exactly that, demoed and converted the facilities into residential apartments. Tumbleweed estimated that cost at the time to be at least $300,000 or $400,000 per unit, and they just couldn't afford to do that. Beyond the cost, by 2023, we no longer had the right to occupy most of those facilities, and you can't demo and rebuild and remediate a building that you either don't have access to or that you're not sure you're going to have long-term because the relationship with the landlord is soured. The staff memo characterizes Tumbleweed's decision not to spend that amount of money as a business decision, but spending hundreds of thousands of dollars that you don't have to renovate facilities for a rule that the city has already voted to retire in facilities that you don't know will be long-term homes for you is not a viable compliance pathway. It's an economically irrational outcome that no reasonable analysis actually supports. The waiver provision in the rule exists precisely for situations where compliance would be economically catastrophic. On leasing or developing or purchasing, these are options 2 and 3 in the memo, a new site. This is exactly what Tumbleweed has been working toward for well over 15 months. They engaged the real estate broker. They've searched for properties online. They've not found suitable space available in Steamboat Springs. As this council knows, marijuana cultivation and manufacturing are not open zoning. These activities are relegated to only a few zoning classifications and only a few pockets of the city. And Tumbleweed has just not been able to find a viable property. Even if they were to find one today or last week or last month, the process to go through permitting and then build out a facility for cultivation is going to take no less than 6 months, probably longer. And then they still have to cultivate and get through a harvest cycle, which the quickest that I'm aware of is 3 months. Most people grow closer to 4. And that doesn't allow for any time to actually sell the locally grown product before the end of the year and the end of the rule. And so even a perfectly executed build out that we start, tomorrow, it just isn't going to get Tumbleweed to a 50% local sourcing compliance for 2025. A couple of comments that were made a few minutes ago before I started were that Tumbleweed has been operating out of compliance for some time, but that's not the case. The Tumbleweed is operating in compliance with the waiver granted last year. And while that did expire in January of 2026, they immediately requested a new waiver and explained to the city the basis for the request, some of which I will share in a moment here. And then, on purchasing from local licensees, which is the 4th option that the staff memo recommends we take or should have taken, Tumbleweed has been doing so, and I'll go into more detail on that. Multiple attachments to the memo characterize the local sourcing requirement as a vertical integration rule. It's not that. Vertical integration requires a business to produce what it sells. This section of the rule requires local sourcing. And because we don't have the means to produce, what that means in practice is that we must purchase from our competitors within Steamboat city limits or be in violation of the rule. At the 2025 hearing, Mr. Foote correctly told this council that there's not a state mandate for the rule. It was a decision made by a prior council, and that the council could repeal at any time before the 2027 sunset. To my knowledge, Steamboat is the only city in Colorado that imposes this type of rule and restriction. And I raise this because I think that it warrants understanding what the city is being asked to enforce. And that's a mandatory local purchasing obligation that forces Tumbleweed to buy from competitors in one of the most constrained commercial real estate markets in the state and within a geographic boundary so narrow that compliance has been structurally impossible for us. Given that we have no cultivation capacity of our own, both the rule and the conditions to last year's waiver require that we attempt to source from the local market. But the market here does not support the variety of products that get Tumbleweed to 50% of all the products sold in its store. There are only two other licensees in Steamboat Springs whom Tumbleweed can source from. The first is Billow, and the second is DNC Medical Marijuana LLC, which does business as Golden Leaf. You heard from both of them. And they both submitted letters for tonight. Tumbleweed has attempted to purchase from Golden Leaf a few times over the past year, but Golden Leaf does not sell wholesale flower, and it has only had excess concentrate available for Tumbleweed to purchase one time. Exhibit 5 in the packet I submitted is a transfer report identifying the products Tumbleweed did purchase from Golden Leaf. While Tumbleweed also attempted to purchase additional product, it just never worked out. You'll see in the packet in October of 2025, Tumbleweed placed an order for product from Golden Leaf through LeafLink, and that is a cannabis wholesale marketplace on which businesses can list their available product. As you'll see in that exchange, Golden Leaf canceled the order because of equipment malfunction in their lab. They apologized. They were very courteous about it, professional, but they said they would reach back out to Tumbleweed when product became available for wholesale again. You can see Exhibit 6A for that exchange. Golden Leaf did not reach back out, and so after, I think, 4 months, Tumbleweed contacted them again in February of 2026. Golden Leaf's lab director informed Tumbleweed that Golden Leaf has had ongoing mechanical issues, that they're trying to keep their own store stocked, and that they don't know when they'll be able to offer wholesale product again. And that's in Exhibit 6B. I note this because the memo includes that letter from Golden Leaf's counsel as attachment 6. And while the letter is largely a vertical integration policy discussion, it does conclude by stating, quote, Tumbleweed has not contacted Golden Leaf regarding wholesale product, end quote. And while that assertion is really damning, it's also not true. So that leaves Billow as Tumbleweed's only meaningful local source. And Tumbleweed does buy from Billow regularly. Billow supplies Tumbleweed with flour and concentrates and very occasionally edible products. If you look at Exhibit 7A and 7B, you see that Tumbleweed has made 13 separate flour purchases since January of 2025. And if you look at 8A and 8B, you'll see 10 concentrate purchases during the same time frame, the last of which included a few edible products. Exhibits 9 and 10 are a few examples of emails coordinating product purchases with Billow, but even still, product purchased from Billow represents a negligible amount of the total sales that Tumbleweed made in 2025, something like 5%. But that number isn't a measure of Tumbleweed's efforts or its commitment to complying with the local source rule. It's a measure of the limited types of product this market can supply. The 5% number can't grow enough to matter. Even if Billow had unlimited capacity to cultivate flower and manufacture concentrates, the flower and concentrates together only represent about 30% of what Tumbleweed sells from its dispensary. Tumbleweed's top selling products are products we don't get from Billow. Edibles, vape cartridges, these are things that Billow either never or very rarely supplies to us, largely because they don't manufacture some of these things. So even if Tumbleweed bought 100% of all of its flower and all of its concentrate from Billow and stocked nothing but Billow flower and concentrates on its shelves, it would still only be sourcing about 30% of local product because customers prefer other products. So the 50% threshold is not just difficult to reach. If you can't grow and manufacture your own, it's mathematically unreachable given the types of products the market can provide here. And once again, Billow and Golden Leaf are Tumbleweed's competitors. When Billow did sell to Tumbleweed, it did so at a substantial markup compared to average industry rates. Billow's letter, which again is attachment 5, states in the second bullet point on the first page that, quote, Billow provided cannabis products to Tumbleweed at their request and at market wholesale rates to assist their efforts toward compliance, end quote. But if you take a look at Exhibit 11, statewide average market rate for retail flower right now, as published by the Colorado Marijuana Enforcement Division, is $648. For all of 2025, it sat around the same $650 mark. Billow charges Tumbleweed $1,300 per pound, which is double that amount. And you could take a look at Exhibit 12 to see some of Billow's invoices. Tumbleweed pays that premium as a condition of last year's waiver, but the cost of Billow's product is substantially higher than the cost of product that Steamboat can source from outside city limits. I've included as Exhibit 13 an email from Tumbleweed's purchasing manager comparing Billow's price per pound versus other vendors that Tumbleweed regularly purchases from. As you can see, Tumbleweed routinely pays 40% or more for flour that it gets from Billow compared to other sources. And our sales data shows that Tumbleweed's customers don't want to buy Billow products from Tumbleweed when they can get the same products down the street, probably for cheaper. So Tumbleweed can't control what its customers choose to buy. When a Billow product and a competitor's product sit on the same shelf, customers will consistently choose the competitor. Tumbleweed constantly has excess Billow inventory that it can't sell, and enforcement of the rule would not just require Tumbleweed to buy from Billow, which it does, it would require Tumbleweed to stop carrying the products its customers actually want to purchase from Tumbleweed and instead replace them with Tumbleweed's competitors' products that they can get down the road. So on top of the pricing premium, Billow also requires requires payment on delivery, and that's unlike most other vendors Tumbleweed works with. So the cash flow burden is compounded at every purchase as well when we buy from local. The rule itself and the condition to Tumbleweed's 2025 waiver require Tumbleweed to absorb a significant and permanent cost disadvantage for the sake of compliance with a requirement it can't meet, and that's set to expire in less than 9 months. I hope this illustrates that Tumbleweed's commitment to local sourcing is real. It's not symbolic. My client has paid a meaningful premium on the limited product it could source, knowing all the while it would still have to come before you today and engage in this waiver process. So the rule, I think an analogy here is, it's the equivalent of requiring every liquor store in Steamboat Springs to source at least 50% of all the alcohol that store sells from Mountain Tap or Storm Peak or Yampa Valley Brewery. And it's not just beer, but all spirits and wine as well. That rule doesn't exist for liquor. No city in Colorado imposes anything like this elsewhere. It exists only in Steamboat, only for marijuana by decision of a prior council who agreed to sunset it, and with no state mandate requiring it. So despite what may have been good intentions to stimulate local economy when enacting the rule, it has significantly prejudiced Tumbleweed. It's forced Tumbleweed to pay anti-competitive prices and created a protected market for competitors. Tumbleweed has done what was required under it by the conditions to last year's waiver. It has sourced what it could from available local suppliers. It's paid a premium to do that. It spent the last year and more searching for a path back to its own local production, but it's come up empty. The 50% requirement is not only out of reach, but it's out of reach not through any failure or effort of intent, but because the local supply just simply doesn't exist at the scale the ordinance requires unless you can grow your own. The ordinance anticipates exactly this kind of situation, and a waiver is appropriate here as it was last year. So we respectfully ask this council to grant the waiver of the 50% sourcing requirement through January 1 of 2027, when the rule terminates by its own terms. For the record, I do want to note that our participation tonight shouldn't be construed as a waiver of our rights to seek judicial review of any adverse decision or of any constitutional claims about the rule itself and arising from application of the ordinance. But council members, truly, I thank you. I know that was a lot of information. And I know you've heard a lot of it last year, but I think it bears repeating, and we appreciate your patience. I think I'm under the 30 minutes. Sherry Marzario, who is the owner of Tumbleweed Steamboat LLC, would like to speak very briefly to her efforts to find a new location. And then I believe Madison Marzario, her daughter and one of the managers, can address some of the purchasing dynamics that I raised in a little bit more detail. And after that, we are happy to try and answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Dan, is there anything you would like to? Are we waiting for the other two? I don't see anybody on.
Sherry is on. If I hope she can unmute herself and speak for. I think she's just got a few notes.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to start my video. Okay. Hello, my name is Sherry Marzario. I am the owner of Tumbleweed Steamboat. And over the last couple of years, I've been searching for a new cultivation and extraction space in the city of Steamboat so we can try to comply with this local source rule. I've worked with a commercial real estate broker for over 15 months, and I've also searched online listings directly at loopnet.com, the agency, and the Steamboat Group. Every inquiry has come back the same. Either there's nothing available or the property's not zoned for cannabis cultivation or extraction. I've been making an effort, but I haven't found any spaces in Steamboat Springs for what we need. I just wanted the council to understand that I didn't take the waiver lightly, and I've put my best efforts forward. It's just a restricted zoning area, and it's been very difficult. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Madison, are you there?
Hi, yes, Madison Marzario, Denver, Colorado. I am Sherry's daughter. I did happen to work with Tumbleweed over the course of the last 6 years. Thank you, everyone, for your time. I really just wanted to reiterate or put into perspective what Nadav had mentioned earlier. There's no industry that I'm aware of, whether it be in the United States, Colorado, or Steamboat, that requires an industry to purchase 50% of their products from local sourcing. Again, just to emphasize that for everyone, this isn't just beer that we would be talking about from a local brewery. This is all of the alcohol that is sold across any of the restaurants or bars. I know that a few of you do own and operate your own businesses as well. I'd like you to put yourself in our position or put yourself in the position of someone else that is not reaping the benefits of this regulation or ordinance that is to sunset in January. I've been in the industry for over 10 years at this point. I've seen a lot of changes across multiple states, specifically Colorado. I think it's fair to say Billow has done a phenomenal job of bringing credibility and recognition into the state of Colorado for premium flower as well as premium concentrates. I personally myself am a huge fan of Billow products. They're always clean, very tasteful, and they win several awards. However, the market has shifted drastically. Golden Leaf, I believe, is a great example of that. Right now, they're struggling to source, or they're struggling to keep products on their shelf themselves. That disallows us to purchase anything from Golden Leaf. Granted, Golden Leaf does not have as great of a reputation as Billow has, so that leaves us with Billow to purchase from. The purchasing patterns for consumer behaviors are completely out of our control. I can't have a customer come into a dispensary and say, you need to order Billow or you need to purchase Billow. When I have a rosin gummy from Dialed In, one of the top gummy brands in Colorado, next to a gummy from Billow that's not live resin, it's distillate, they're always opting for that Dialed In gummy. Unless I remove every other category or every other brand, there's no way that I can control the consumer behavior patterns to purchase just from Billow. Sure, I can offer the products, which we have.
Can you finish up in the next 30 seconds or so, please?
Yep. We've done a great job with sourcing this stuff. Again, we can't control what the consumer ends up buying. If you've looked at the Marijuana Enforcement Division and insights for the state of Colorado, we've had a huge transition over the last 12 years that this law has, or this ordinance has been in place. Flower isn't the top category right now. There's other product types that aren't available in Steamboat. So I'll leave it with that we are trying to source everything that we can. We cannot control the consumer behavior. And I don't think the ordinance is consistent or fair across the city of Steamboat, let alone the state of Colorado for the Marijuana Enforcement Division.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Before we open it up for any questions, is there anything, Dan, that you would like to address from what Mr. Ashner said?
Yeah, briefly, Mr. Ashner alluded to an MED document, which he considered to be confidential, and there was some information in the memo that was drawn from MED documents. Mr. Ashner has not provided to me any sort of legal authority as to why these documents might be confidential, so I think that you should go ahead and disregard that argument in considering the evidence that's been presented to you. Mr. Ashner also suggested that I had been in communication with Billow and somehow that was improper. I did have a conversation with with Billo regarding the status of Tumbleweed's licensing. I have also had conversations with Mr. Ashner that Billo was not party to. So that's just sort of, part of the process of being the city attorney and answering people's questions. And Mr. Ashner did talk about the date at which Tumbleweed requested this hearing. There was an informal inquiry, I believe, on January 22nd, but the formal request did not come in until February 23rd. And then Mr. Ashner objected to the fact that there are some factual questions that have been presented to you tonight that will also be relevant to the licensing hearing that has been scheduled before the hearings officer. That's just the reality of things. There are some overlapping factual issues. That does not mean that you cannot consider them tonight. And so I would recommend that you disregard that objection and go ahead and consider the information that's been presented in the packet. And then finally, I would like to echo the comments Mr. Ashner made about vertical integration versus local sourcing. Vertical integration is requiring, the licensee to produce their own marijuana, and that concept was part of the state regulations in 2013, and that was the city's original approach to this issue. In 2019, the regulation that was adopted it's not vertical integration, it's local sourcing. So it doesn't matter who grows it, but it has to be produced locally. So I think that some documents refer to vertical integration, but what we are really talking about tonight is local sourcing or local production. That is all I have.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone on council have any questions for either attorney at this point?
I have a comment. Throughout the presentation, there was an assumption that this will sunset. The vertical integration piece, is going to sunset in January. That may be so, unless we revisit that with council. But I will be recommending that council direct staff to relook at this before this sunset. So I would say you cannot go with the assumption that this requirement is going away.
Well, in fact, we will be discussing that in a few short months.
Steve, I had a question. So, and this could be for Sherry or Nadev or anyone that want to answer it. I'm considering just looking at 15 months ago, you came here and asked for a waiver. And during the minutes that I read of that meeting, and I was at that meeting, we gave them the waiver and asked them to find a solution. What I also noticed throughout the entire minutes of that meeting was how majority of council at that time was amicable to opening up the local source manufacturing to all of Routt County. I mean, that's a prevalent comment by Gail. You had said it, I had said it. There are others that had said it. It's in the minutes. So as I'm looking through this and I'm wondering that we knew, or you may not have known, my question is this: did you know that at January 15 months ago, 12 months ago, that you were finding a problem with finding a place to have a grow facility within the city limits, that there was an option from council saying we should expand this greater? Did you even consider that as an option? And now you're coming to us 15 months later and saying there's just nothing in the city of Steamboat Springs.
If that's directed at me, I appreciate the question, sir. The answer is we do routinely source from Routt County outside of the city of Steamboat limits. But the conversation last year, while very robust on this topic, you're right, I remember it vividly. Ultimately, there was no finding to expand the ordinance. And one of the counselors, I cannot remember whom at this point, said something to the effect of, well, should we have Tumbleweed submit regular reports? And that was shot down in the final motion that passed. The council said, you have a waiver, your two conditions to compliance are to try and source locally and try and find a location to cultivate your own in the city. And so we didn't directly reach out to the clerk and say, hey, we can't find a location, we were told to come back in a year and present kind of where we are. And today we are presenting, and in the packet I submitted, presenting that we have been looking, we have expended a lot of effort looking for a location and we can't find one. The way the ordinance reads, it hasn't been modified. It still requires us to find a location in the city of Steamboat. So we're happy to expand our search to Routt County if need be, but we're trying to comply with the ordinance as written, which is Steamboat proper. I don't know if that answers your question well, sir, but I remember the discussion of Routt County. Had the ordinance said Routt County, I think we may be in compliance with the rule, given what we source from there. I don't have those numbers, so I can't say definitively, but we are unable to comply if it's Steamboat proper.
So 15 months ago, when you got a waiver, you asked us to waive a rule of your license because you were not abiding that rule because your business decided to close these down for mold and whatever reasons. You're coming to us 15 months later asking us for another change in the code or waiver to the code. Did it ever appeal to you as a company that when you read the minutes and hear the tone and tenor of the council 15 months ago, that maybe if we found something in Hayden or Oak Creek that would allow us to have a grow facility and follow the rule of engagement for a license, you could have asked for a waiver. You asked for a waiver 15 months ago. You're asking for one now. Why didn't you just help us and ask for that then?
We did ask last year that the council revisit the rule, and the council agreed that they would consider it. We do not set the council's agenda. We have communicated.
Fair enough.
But sir, I would disagree with the characterization that this was a business decision. As I mentioned, our grow facility, one of them was, we got a notice of non-renewal from our landlord. That's not a decision we were able to make. And the other one, I don't think it's reasonable to say we made a business decision not to spend more money than we have to remediate a grow facility that we don't know if we'll be in 6 months. So if you want to characterize it that way, I suppose that's your right, but I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's a rational decision. But again, we don't set the agenda. We are open to this board deliberating. This is the first we've heard that the board is going to discuss the rule itself in a couple months' time. We'd certainly like to participate in that process. But yeah, you guys granted the waiver last year because we had mold that caused us to not be able to grow. The issues that existed last year are exactly the same. We had mold that caused us to not be able to grow, and we haven't been able to find a new location to do so despite our efforts.
Okay. Other questions? Anyone have?
I just want to clarify, the time that they've not been in compliance has been since October 2023. Is that correct?
We had a waiver for all of 2025, so.
I mean, factually speaking, you guys haven't sold 50% or more product sourced in Steamboat since when? October 2023?
Since we lost our grow facilities in October, the last of our grow facilities in October 23.
Thanks.
Okay. Yes.
Just one question. So you could not resolve the waiver issues within the past 15 months. If you got another waiver, what would that do in terms of how would you get back into compliance? Because I've already stated we're going to revisit this, and don't expect this to sunset in January. So that's been your statement. So given that, how do you expect to get into compliance?
It's a fair question. So there are a few things there, and I think Madison will want to chime in as well. But first, the ordinance as written says it will sunset. I understand this body can absolutely extend, the same as this body can absolutely terminate the rule early if it wanted to. That was part of last year's discussion. That's up to this body to decide. We hope we'll be allowed to participate in that. But we would ask our competitors to sell us product at market rate. I think that would help us tremendously. Two, we will continue to exhaust our efforts to look for a location, though we can't magically create a viable zoning location. So we may ask this body to consider opening up new zoning classifications for cultivation and extraction. And three, I think we would ask this body if it's inclined to renew or inclined to grant us a waiver today to expand the scope of our compliance efforts. So maybe it's all of Routt County and not just the city of Steamboat. And I think I can't say with any certainty that we will comply, but I'm certain we'll be much closer to compliance if surrounding areas are included in a waiver or in the future version of the ordinance should it survive after January of next year. Madison wanted to say one thing on that, I believe, but I hope that helps, sir.
Thanks, Nadav. Yeah, just to answer the two previous questions briefly as well. We would be in compliance if it was extended throughout Routt County. There's a large manufacturer for distillate. To answer, I can't read everyone's names, but to answer the question about reporting, just to reiterate, the reporting ordinance has never been executed until our first request. So still to this day, we're not clear, or it's not clear if anyone has ever been in compliance prior to 2023, as far as we know. As for what we would do differently, yes, we would absolutely request that Routt County was included in this, not only because there's additional spaces and opportunities, but there's more than 2 competitors that are available to work with us. There is one that is in Routt County where we can absolutely move in. It's very common in the cannabis industry for co-packing facilities. So we rent the space during a certain time from them, or we can pay them a small fee to have them co-manufacture all of our products on our behalf to sell in our stores. In addition to that, a lot of those starting material, that distillate, is being sourced across the state of Colorado. So a handful of the top brands are purchasing from a company in Routt County, which would make us beyond compliant.
Okay, thank you. I had one question for you, Mr. Ashner, and that is, you talk about you can't find a place to grow your product, a facility. And we granted you that waiver, as we said, 15 months ago, and you put a email in here into our packet from February of 25 saying that you were talking to a Mr. Silas or Sayas. Yes, Chris. And he said there wasn't anything available. Then you put another memo in there a year later, February 2026, not even 2 months ago, asking the same question to Chris. If this was so important to you, why did a whole year go by and you didn't have any other correspondence around looking for a property?
Yeah, respectfully, sir, I didn't want to overload, every correspondence, and many of them were by phone. And so we had an arrangement with Mr. Sias where he basically said, and Sherry can probably speak to this because it's her relationship, not mine, but my understanding is Mr. Sias said, I'll look, and if I find anything, I'll tell you. And so the lack of routine communication with him isn't indicative of us not being on the lookout for a location. It's indicative of the fact that Mr. Sias couldn't find a location and tell us, hey, this is available. I'm happy to try and get a statement from him to supplement the record, but it's not just emails. Those aren't the only efforts we expended. Ms. Marzario called Mr. Sias, as she testified to a few minutes ago. She was looking routinely on publicly available sources herself. It wasn't just outsourcing the efforts to Chris. There were efforts expended. So I understand the city claims there's no evidence of any efforts, in between February and February. But that's not actually the case, even though I understand the record maybe looks like that's the case.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any other questions? If not, we will open it up to public comment. And if there's anybody in the room who would like to make a public comment regarding this particular case, you have 3 minutes and you can come on down and tell us your name and address. And if there's anybody online who would like to make a public comment, please raise your hand. Come on down.
Thank you very much. Charlie Petty, Chief Operating Officer of Billow, 795 Conifer Circle. I just would like to address a couple things. Premium pricing was said as a constricting factor of them not being able to be in compliance with this. Our pricing is consistent across the board, across the entire state. I have 100+ retailers that exist in affluent communities, non-affluent communities. Everybody pays the same pricing no matter what. And we offer a ton of different products. So we have all varieties of vaporizer cartridges, dabbable concentrates, edibles, flower at multiple different pricing tiers. So there is plenty of product available, and I do have a surplus at all times. To the point of the cash on delivery, the reason that we do that is because Tumbleweed has about 98,000 in past due, according to the Cannabis Credit Association. So it's very difficult for us to offer terms to companies that do not consistently pay their bills on time. We use this Cannabis Credit Association to vet all of our customers, not just Tumbleweed. Billow has been in compliance with this rule since inception. We have submitted proof every single quarter of that. We submitted it without being asked, and we've been submitting it after being asked. It's my opinion that it's not the job of the city to police this. It's the job of the licensee to follow the rules and answer the questions and have proof when asked. I also would like to address the fact that in page 9, they have a email stating that they are going to vacate 2835 Downhill Plaza, Unit 605. We actually took over that lease. We incurred mitigation costs. We operated that facility for 4 years. That facility had the ability to produce 200 pounds every 3 months, which is more than enough to supply the needs. So it's kind of surprising to me that they would state that they were not able to find the facilities when they in fact actually had possession and operation of one that could very easily supply them, and they chose to vacate that premise. So it's interesting to me the fact that they're stating that. The whole entire thing seems more of ask for forgiveness instead of permission to me. And that bothers me a little bit just in the sense of being a good businessman and being an active member of this community and acting in good faith in general. I believe that it's the duty of a business to do the best of their ability, follow the rules, be in compliance, and essentially just be good representatives of this community in general. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Is there anybody else in the room who would like to come on down and make public comment? Okay, let me look online. And Dan, we have both Mr. Ashner and Emily Kelly both raising their hands. What is the protocol here regarding that?
Well, once public comment is done, you could allow Mr. Ashner an opportunity to respond, but I think you should complete the public comment before we do that.
Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to make a public comment? Well, Emily Kelly, she would be under the same, or as Mr.
The applicant.
Emily, she's the attorney for Golden Leaf, not the applicant.
Yeah, okay, so she would be fine.
Yes.
Okay, Emily, you're up. You have 3 minutes. Please state your name and address.
Hello again, my name is Emily Kelly, 235th Street. Again, representative of Golden Leaf. I've been their attorney since 2014. Thanks for taking the time to consider the issues today. I've been going back and forth with the owners of Golden Leaf who are watching this as well. And there's just a couple things that we wanted to mention as a point of clarification. Contrary to the letter we previously submitted, Tumbleweed did in fact purchase a total of 30 pens for $720 over a year ago in March 2025. We wanted to extend our sincerest apologies for our forgetfulness, but that is the only product that Tumbleweed has ever purchased from Golden Leaf. After going through our documentation in preparation for this hearing, it appears that it was quite difficult in terms of getting paid for that product, and that was $720. And so as a result, I think that there might have been some trepidation in terms of selling additional product to Tumbleweed. Golden Leaf also has competitive pricing. Golden Leaf has had vertical integration since its inception and also self-regulates regardless of whether or not it's enforced. In October 2025, it looks like someone from Tumbleweed reached out to Golden Leaf and asked about product available during that time. We did in fact have a chiller go down. It worked. However, prior to that time, including January 2025, when their waiver went into effect, until about October 2025, and it has been fixed as of months ago. That being said, we are going over everything that has been said during this hearing, and other than that chiller and that brief moment, we've had no issues with supply. We offer competitive pricing, not just for the higher end premium cannabis, but for more affordable product. And in all candor, Golden Leaf and Billow have figured out how to do the local sourcing and vertical integration. So it's clearly not impossible. Is it expensive? Yes, but that's what it costs to be a member of this community. Golden Leaf and Billow have made substantial investments in this community. We each employ a lot of people. We have a positive relationship. We can all have, productive conversations with one another, because at least over at Golden Leaf, we believe that a rising tide floats all boats, but you have to be a member of this community, and that requires an investment. And so Tumbleweed is looking for a complete and total waiver of local sourcing, but based on the last hearing in January, I guess we find it interesting that why not ask about Routt County as a whole? A total waiver seems like an unfair advantage given the state of the cannabis industry and where cannabis is in the city of Steamboat Springs. But why not even bring up Routt County as a whole? We find that aspect cause for pause. So that's all we have for tonight. But if anyone has any questions or wants further clarification, we are happy to provide that. Thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you, Emily. Mr. Ashner, there's nobody else here on public comment, so I'm going to close public comment and I'll let you respond.
Thank you so much, Chairman. Very, very briefly, I know we've been here a while. In response to Mr., I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing, Petty. I think Madison may be able to speak to this, but one of the things that came across my desk from my client, in the last couple of hours, was an email from Billow to a number of vendors a day or two after we purchased product at $1,300 a pound, offering a extremely discounted, the same product for an extreme discount. And I haven't had time to get that prepared or submit to this council. I'm happy to, but Tumbleweed was conveniently not on the list of recipients who could have purchased at a discounted price. So while they may sell to anyone and everyone at $1,300 a pound, they also offer discounts to everyone else. He also mentioned this location that can produce 200 pounds every quarter. That was one of the locations that we did not abandon. An email that says we are vacating doesn't mean we voluntarily vacated. The landlord terminated that lease, told us he would not renew that lease. If he had renewed that lease, we very well may be in compliance. That's not a business decision or a voluntary decision of any kind that we made. And so, the idea that an email and a document, you said page 9, but I'm not sure which document, that we said we're vacating doesn't render the vacating voluntary. And I think that warrants noting. Ms. Kelly stated, first of all, very much appreciate clarifying the record. Didn't have to do that, but that was kind. As of February of this year, we were told that they have no available product for wholesale and that they would let us know when they do. And that is, I think, Exhibit 9 and 10 in my packet. That's a clear record. And, she mentioned that Billow and Golden Leaf had it figured out. I think it bears noting, one, the rule wasn't enforced until 23, but Tumbleweed also had it figured out. Tumbleweed was operating on all cylinders. They were doing well. They were cultivating and manufacturing most of what they sold at their stores in their facilities because their brands were on their shelves. But mold and non-renewals were absolutely catastrophic to their ability to do so. Those are the reasons a waiver was granted last year. And the conditions of the waiver required Tumbleweed to try and find a new location and try and source locally. I hope I've shown that we have tried to do both of those things, and that the market isn't supportive of our ability to comply despite our efforts. We hope that to the extent this council, is inclined to consider our waiver request, that, reasonable conditions can be imposed on it, including expanding the territory to Routt County, in which case we think we will very quickly be able to come into compliance for the remainder of this year. But we were not out of compliance last year because we were operating entirely under a waiver. So again, thank you all. I know this is challenging, but so far it's been a good discussion. We appreciate you taking into account everything we've shared with you today.
Okay, thank you. Okay, council. Let's deliberate.
Could I make one comment before you get into deliberations?
Yes.
It does relate to, generally, the scope of the hearing tonight is for you to consider whether to grant the waiver, and that relates to the criteria that are in the code. I did want to note, with particular reference to the letter that you received from Billow, that document addresses a number of issues and not just the waiver. So I'd like to focus on the waiver issues, and to the extent that the Billow public comment or other public comment doesn't address this waiver issue, you shouldn't be considering that information.
Okay, thank you. All right, who'd like to go?
So I'll
Councilor
start.
Dixon?
Yeah, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So when we look at the requirements for in the code for cultivation, it's really clear. And if you own a business in Steamboat, it is your responsibility to understand the code and comply. Ordinances, whether you agree with them or not, those are essentially our law. And so right now we have code, we have an ordinance that's very clear on how folks need to operate in the marijuana industry. I do want to highlight that Mr. Ashner said it's going to take at least 6 months once they even find a place. So if you do the math, we're looking at another year. And to me, it just seems like they're hoping it's going to sunset. Regardless, we have an ordinance and our code is crystal clear on the requirements. So I have nothing else to comment on this.
Thank you. Councilor Gary.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I totally concur with you, Councilor Dixon. I mean, in my notes, as I was listening here, is whether or not the rules are enforced, right? Or it's incumbent upon a business to lawfully comply. So I think, as you've stated, it's pretty clear in terms of what the requirements have been. And, they've not been in compliance since October 2023. Certainly we did allow for the waiver during the last year. But again, I don't think we can anyone can depend upon this decision about the rule sunsetting and what council is going to do. That's not a foregone conclusion. That's certainly something that's up for discussion. Yeah. So that's my opinion as well.
Okay, good. Anyone else?
I see this as a matter of fairness. There's an added compliance cost that the other two businesses have had to bear, and it's an added cost and expense. Tumbleweed has not had this added expense since October of 2023. It's just as a matter of fairness. I don't think that granting this, and they've already received a year, 15 months. And so I don't see any reason to grant this waiver again.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Agosta?
I have nothing to add. I agree with what.
Yeah. Okay. And I don't have anything to add. I think what the points that were made were spot on. So with that, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to deny the Tumbleweed request for a waiver
Of the local production.
of the local production requirements set forth in section 12.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a second? Okay, we have a motion by Councilor Swintek, second by Councilor Agosta. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you. It's 6:25, and I would like to take a motion, if we could, to adjourn from or before we do that, we do need to approve the minutes from September 2nd, 2025. So has anybody looked at those minutes and are there any comments or questions, or I'll entertain a motion to approve those?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Counselor Gary, second by Counselor Swintek to approve the minutes from September 2nd, 2025. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes 6-0. And now I will entertain one final motion to adjourn from our marijuana licensing authority meeting and go back to our regular city council work session.
So moved.
Second. Oh,
Okay, motion by Counselor Swintek, second by Counselor Pacino. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We are back into our regular meeting and our work session. It's 6:25. We have 2 topics on the work session. We can either take a break now or in between the 2 topics. What would you prefer?
Take a break, please.
Yes,
Thank you.
we'll take a 10-minute break.
Thank you.
So with that in mind, I will turn it over to Chuck to talk about the fire department consolidation under fiscal sustainability. Success.
Think we have success. Would you prefer that I stand at the podium or does it?
Whatever is comfortable for you.
Sitting down might be a little more comfortable for me as long as I can. I will stand up. All right. Good evening, Council. Chuck Sarasolo, your fire chief. We're here tonight to talk about kind of a high-level overview of fire district consolidation, what we mean by that, how that might look, and the challenges and benefits that that consolidation may involve if we decide to move forward. So, and I appreciate you taking the time to discuss this evening. So that's our purpose, really just what I just stated. So the consolidation of the City of Steamboat Springs Fire Department into the Steamboat Springs Area Fire Protection District, and I will get into some definitions of that as we move on. This topic does align with a couple strategic objectives, as well as one of the community plan key initiatives that I won't read for you. So after this evening, or after this discussion, the couple questions we'll ask is council interested in further investigating it? I do not plan to get too into the weeds and into too many details of what it would entail, just kind of that high level overview. So council's direction would then send us off to say, well, if you are interested, is then the Fire Oversight Committee, which involves 2 council members and 2 district board members, the team to at least start taking the lead on that and diving into that topic. So let's talk about a little bit of what the problem is, I guess, and why we're even talking about this today. And one of the first things I'll just state kind of right off the bat is, as fire chief, I really report to 2 policy groups, one being city council, of course, for the city, and then the other one being the fire district board. And I believe my task as fire chief is to keep our community as safe as possible through fire services. I do believe, and this topic has been lingering for many, many years, I do believe, as well as the previous chiefs to me, as well as some city managers that you've heard is that ultimately fire district consolidation really would best serve the community that we currently serve with the Steamboat Springs Fire Department, and that is the city of the 10 square miles plus the 380 square miles that involves the fire district. So what's going on is we've looked back, we keep talking about increasing level of service. And I want to discuss that for a little bit, because what we're anticipating is continued increase and continued costs to serve our community with fire service. So looking back over 20 years, just at call volume, what we know is that call volume ebbs and flows. Sometimes it goes up high, sometimes it drops down. But when you look at that trend line over the last 20 years, we have an increase of 4% annual call volume every year. So every year we increase by about 4% on average. So on a lot of our projections and our strategic planning, we utilize that as a target point. When do we hit capacity of our current staffing? When do we hit capacity of our current stations? When do we hit a service level that we deem isn't appropriate anymore for the community? The next number we look at a lot is called concurrent call volume. And that's when multiple calls are happening at the same time. That being a smaller number has been increasing larger, about 5.62% over the last 15 years. And 15 years is just the number we had good data back to. And right now, last year, like that concurrent call volume number is 754. To add a little context to that, though, the city has been, and the fire district have been doing a great job, I believe, in continuing to increase our ability to serve the public. So currently, we have 2 fire stations that are each staffed with an ambulance and an engine. So for a lot of our basic calls, we can handle 2 calls at the same time. However, I do want to mention that anything larger than a basic kind of medical call or fire alarm, a structure fire, a wildland fire, a hazmat incident, multi-vehicle accident, that actually takes all of our crew, so all 10 people to go to that call. And in those situations, the second call out does not get the adequate response we would like. But So if we then assume that those are getting covered, and let's just look at third calls out and above, because third calls, we can confidently say, both of our crews are busy. We cannot respond to that third call out as well as we would like. And what that means is that we're typically reaching out either to our folks that are at home and saying, hey, please, could you come in and help us out if you're available? Or we're reaching to our mutual aid departments around the county. And we know that in the best case scenario, it's going to take them at least 20 minutes to get into Steamboat, but more likely 30 minutes or so. So our concern is third call out and higher. Those are averaging about 133 calls a year. And when we look at numbers of sort of critical point, we call those overflow calls. We really are saying by the time we've hit 200, we need to have already acted on whether it's additional staffing and or a station at that point. For context, 200 third call out a year are about 4 a week. Compounding this is that we're really an island here in Steamboat and Routt County as compared to a lot of areas. We don't have the Eagle Valley situation where you have 11 fire departments that can all help cover each other and kind of move their resources around. We're really in an island here where our surrounding fire districts are actually also struggling themselves. They're losing a lot of their volunteers. And every time we ask them to cover our area, which we do quite a bit, then they're saying, okay, are we okay with leaving our town uncovered? So that's becoming more and more of an issue as we move forward. So those are some of the challenges that we're looking at as we're out where we're growing and how we're going to have to address those. The other thing that I would say that we'd like to be addressing a little bit better than we are doing today is our wildfire situation. Now, I don't want to imply that we're not doing and we haven't been doing a lot of good things. We've increased our wildfire seasonal staffing. And in this year, we actually were just talking about bringing on 2 more for this season as we're facing some unprecedented situations. So we have been doing a good job. But if I had a magic wand and said, where would I like to be today? If I had that wand to say, give me the money and the resources, we would be in a different spot. We would have even more local resources that we'd bring in on seasonally. We'd likely would have, and this is in our strategic plan, we'd have at least 1 year-round individual that was focused on planning for wildfire season, planning mitigation projects, planning public education events to get the public aware of what's happening and get us better situated. That would also come with increased equipment, apparatus, potentially some equipment that would work on fuels mitigation like a masticator. We'd be working a little bit more with the Wildfire Council and supporting them in a better way. We don't monetarily support the Wildfire Council, but we would be using them for public education as well as pushing that out ourselves. And then there's still plenty of funding and grant opportunities out there that we really need people that are working year round to be pushing for that. All of that costs money. So what's the challenge for the city? How do we pay for that? How do we continue to pay for the fire service that we're talking about here? So with all those increased threats, the last published strategic plan was in 2023. It's being updated this year. But in that plan, we have a spreadsheet that looks 6 years ahead of and estimates if the strategic plan were implemented, which I understand it's not always implemented, every aspect of it, but that would anticipate a $12.6 million budget by 2029. So for context, our current budget is at about $8.6 million. So we'd be looking for $4 million in 3 years to fully implement that strategic plan and meet our needs. That's just an operating cost. When you look at capital costs for our strategic plan and what we submit for the CIP, between 27 and 34, we have $9.1 million in capital equipment. That's just apparatus and large equipment like LifePack monitors and ambulance gurneys. So then when we look at the actual stations that are on the horizon, you can see the numbers that we're talking about there. And that doesn't contemplate the additional personnel that would come with a West Side station. So what's the challenge we're faced? Well, the city obviously is talking fiscal sustainability outside of just this conversation about meeting our needs all across the board for all departments to meet service levels. So so that means we're struggling, right? And the fire department, and we all understand that in order to keep all departments afloat, we all have to make sacrifices and work together to do that. So as I mentioned, we're not quite where we'd like to be with wildland fire, our wildland fire program. And so right now, the city is currently funding the fire department at the tune of about $4.1 million out of the general fund. So out of primarily sales tax. The rest of the funding for the fire department comes from a 2 mil property tax that I'll talk a little bit about farther down, to the tune of a little over $2 million that's being generated for that. We still have some wiggle room in there, but we've been using available funds from that to pay for some of the capital equipment we've been purchasing over the last few years. We anticipate that 2 mils will be pretty much fully utilized by operational costs in the next couple of years, particularly if we continue to grow as we have in the strategic plan. So obviously the municipal environment provides competing budget interests throughout the different departments and everything that you guys think about. And fortunately, you don't have to think about fire too often. I'm not here very often for you. That 2 mil solution will likely need to be augmented one way or the other, whether we're talking about the city and how the city might do it, or potentially in this consolidation discussion that we have going on. So what exactly are we talking about when we say fire consolidation? So in this case, I want to be clear, I'm not talking about a fire authority. I'm not talking about re-looking at the IGA and the current situation. What we're talking about is what we had contemplated back in 2018 when there was no mill levy in place. And that is to annex the city residents and the city 10 square miles into the Steamboat Springs Area Fire Protection District's boundaries. And so therefore, they would have the entire area, including the city, in their fire district. So that would result in one fire district with one dedicated funding source and one governing body overseeing the fire department. So that's what when we talk about the things that I'm mentioning as benefits and challenges, that's the consolidation we're talking about. So what it would result in is a single governance fire district model. So it would have one policy, one district board. Now, the board would be just like you folks. They'd be elected officials by the citizens within their district to represent the fire district. Back in 2024, a bill was passed in Colorado that opened up and changed the situation a little bit differently for fire districts than when we first were talking about this in 2018. Of course, there's still the potential for mill levies for a fire district, but that bill also added the potential that a fire district could go to the voters and ask for a little bit of sales tax if they felt that was an avenue they wanted to try to pursue. Or there's also the addition of impact fees. Prior to this bill, fire districts had to get approval from the county in order to implement impact fees. This bill actually now allows fire district boards to implement impact fees without that approval. So a little bit easier process for the fire district boards. This model, it would sort of more directly align the revenue stream to the service that is being provided. So what I mean by that is if you're primarily funded by property tax, you are funding a service that is protecting life and property directly. And so there's a little bit more alignment there than doing it through primarily sales tax, which we're doing through the general fund. A little bit more transparency in regards to it's very clear how much is being collected for the fire service. It's going to the fire service board and it's being distributed for fire service. So it's very easy to track what's coming in and where that money's going in this model. And then, of course, the other difference here is that you have a single focused fire board. All they do is worry about how the fire service is provided to the community. I understand and appreciate the job you folks are doing, but you have a lot to consider in your work regarding all of the operations for the city, and that makes it challenging. The other aspect I would say is that our departments also have a lot that they're thinking about. Our internal departments like finance and IT and HR, they have to consider everybody in the city. And the fire service is really a bit of a unicorn in that situation. We have different scheduling rules. We have different FLSA laws that apply to us. We have different hiring practices and training. And so that has created a lot of extra time for our internal services to help figure out how to handle fire department services within the city. As I mentioned, there's a potential for a 4.1 million of general fund to be allocated differently in this case, and then the impact fee and a little bit of a flexible budget management. I see my time ticking down. Are you okay if I go for a few more minutes?
Yes.
I think I only have a few more minutes. So some of the challenges we'll see is one of the big ones that I'll say is quite apparent is that you would lose control of the fire service for the city of Steamboat Springs. And by that, I just mean that you would not be governing and hiring and doing the oversight of the fire department for the city. The body that would be doing that would be an elected body for the district. There would be some transition requirements. Obviously, we'd have to dive in and figure out how personnel and benefits and all that would transfer to the fire district. There would need to be ballot, public education and ballot measure considerations, and then making sure the district and the city are aligned financially on how this would look, how it would look on a ballot, and that we're all in the same place. And one of the big concerns from your point of view, I would imagine, is making sure that the citizens feel they're going to get the same fire service after this is all done. So that's the community perception and expectation, resource equity I mentioned, and then really it would be transferring a large portion of what is now sales tax into a property tax focused revenue stream for the fire service. This is just another kind of quick pros and cons list that I'm not going to read individually. So the initiative that we've been discussing and talking about really, again, would be my understanding and working with discussing with our legal folks is that it would be an election that would be sponsored by the fire district, and they would be asking the city residents if they're willing to join into the fire district. That would then, in my opinion, create a partnership between the fire district and the city to say, okay, now how do we get this done? Making sure, as I mentioned, that we're aligned on what we think the funding should be, as well as working to get the election passed, so sharing in some of the education and elections. Now, one of the things that is worth noting is on the surface, if all the district did was ask the city voters if they wanted to join into the fire district and left it there, all the city voters would be going from a 2 mil property tax currently paid to the city to 9.24 mils that the district currently collects. I say that, and we do have members of the district board here tonight that can answer some questions. But one of the things we know is that the majority of valuation in our community and certainly in our fire district is in the city of Steamboat Springs. So one of the things we've talked about that the oversight committee would dive into is what exactly is the appropriate level of number of mills that we would need to make sure we're funded for the future and well funded as we move forward. And everybody, at least is open to consideration that 9.24 mils might be too much. We might be able to bring that down a little bit in conjunction with impact fees and other options. Is there a different picture so that city residents wouldn't be faced with such a large jump in mill levies? But that's really what I envision the next steps would be, is really digging into that. As I mentioned, all the revenue from the if this was to pass, the revenue then would all go to the fire district. The other thing I want to note is not only would it be a fire district election, we do sort of have an advocacy group, which some members are here today as well to answer questions with our local firefighters union. I think that's important to note in the sense that I do know oftentimes when elections are kind of brought up, we're wondering, well, who's going to really support and get this information out there when we have to all be quiet and back off. The local union, as well as the state, they're part of the State Firefighters Union and International Union. This is not new territory for those organizations. They have playbooks that can help communities get these type of elections passed. And they have thrown in their hat and saying, of course, they would advocate for this as well. So just to wrap up, the questions really are, do you have any further questions? And then would you be willing to consider diving further into this? And is the Oversight Committee the way to go?
Okay. Thank you, Chuck.
Yeah.
Before we see if there's any questions, I did just want to acknowledge all of you people, firefighters, district board folks, and also our police officer over there in the right-hand corner. Thank you all for your service. We really appreciate what you all do. So thank you. Okay. So do we have questions for Chuck?
You know, let me start off with just one question. Chuck, give me how many cities in the state of Colorado that you know are set up like us, where they have their own fire department versus the district?
So I anticipated that question and I had it written down. There's about 340 some odd fire departments in the state of Colorado, and 260 of them are districts. So roughly 60 to 80 are either municipalities or some other combination.
And are those smaller cities, or are they like Aurora?
It's a mix of both. I can give you some, like Denver actually is a city-run department. Glenwood Springs. Glenwood Springs is similar in our setup that we have today. They're a city department with an IGA with their district.
Okay.
So there's by far the majority of fire departments are fire districts. And what we're seeing is that a lot of our situations are actually moving towards fire districts. Summit Fire just went to a consolidated district. The Roaring Fork Valley just went into a consolidated district. So it's a pretty common theme at this point.
And then the second question that I have is that back in 2018, 17, you had this discussion. Why didn't you go to consolidation then?
Well, a different political environment, I'd say. And yeah, we can.
I'm looking over here at these two.
I'm happy.
You guys were on this, right? Adana, and you guys were part of this discussion back then? You can come to the table.
Part of what we were seeing at that point was it would have been a 0 to 9 mil increase. The Gallagher Amendment was in full play, which meant really the commercial property owners were going to pay about 4 times more than residential property owners. And there wasn't the option of those other things that I just mentioned that were passed in the 2024 bill. And so quite honestly, a lot of the commercial property owners were very concerned about the increase from 0 to 9 mils and the effect on their taxes. And they came out vocally.
Interesting. Thank you.
Other questions?
Not to be flip, but what is the experience of somebody who's one of those 133 third calls? Like, are they standing there watching their house on fire for 30 minutes?
So it depends, right? Of course, but I'll say most commonly what that means is that instead of us leaving our station and driving to that, wherever that location is, so we have a pretty big district, so that could be literally 2 minutes or it could be 40 minutes. But instead of the time frame being drive time, they are now waiting for an ambulance from a surrounding district to drive to Steamboat and then address their call. So if it's a medical call, they could be waiting 40 minutes longer, 30 minutes longer. And oftentimes what we don't know, for instance, West Route has 2 people that are on 24/7, so they might be able to respond in just an ambulance. One of the reasons, and not to get into the operations of it, but oftentimes 2 people in an ambulance isn't really an adequate number of people to handle a call, especially a serious call. If it's anything else, like if we're out on 2 calls and a car accident comes in, then we're asking West Route and Oak Creek maybe to come and help. We're trying to figure out how we scramble to make sure to see if we have anyone that can break free from one of the calls we're currently on. So that might result in less service for that call as well. So it's really a juggling act for our officers to try to figure out how to best suit those calls.
So it could look like having a medical emergency and sitting at home for 30 minutes waiting.
Yes, more than likely, the third call's an out, more than likely, that's how it results.
Okay, thanks.
And that's where when I say, you know, we have between 133 and 200 until we've really hit that maximum. That's sort of a risk tolerance guess, right? That's up to us, but that's where we feel, you know, we need to have action take place.
I wanted to layer on just follow up on that question quickly. And it's really around two things that I think we're kind of falling behind the curve here on. One is the concurrent calls and all the potential issues associated with that. And the other is the wildfire program. And given the situation we're in this year and how that seems to be accelerating over time, would it be fair to say that if we had the consolidation, that we could meet those challenges quicker, faster, more effectively?
So I think that would be fair to say, as long as we move forward looking at what we believe our funding needs are in the future and we set ourselves up properly to grow in the future, right? We could, and I hope that's what we would do. I know we have a lot of smart people in the right places to make that happen. But that would be the only caveat is, right, if we didn't ask for enough mills or make the right combination of funding so that in 3 years we find ourselves, how do we fund, you know, where we need to be? And so we've been doing strategic planning for many years now in order to try to really look 6 years ahead and say, this is where we think based off of the average call volume growth, the increase in concurrent calls, this is what we think we'll need. So we have a good idea of what that funding will look like in 4 or 5 years. So then the next question is, can we get it passed?
So if you have the right strategy and whatnot, it seems to me that there's more of a sense of urgency now than there's ever been.
I mean, based off of what I've, you know, the wildfire alone is a obviously concerning situation. And I by no means want to, again, belittle the work that we've been putting into addressing that. We've come a long way from where we were, and we will always do our best. But yeah, like I said, there's some communities we can look at and say, I really wish we were kind of a little bit closer to that.
Other questions? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Where'd the baby go, first of all?
I don't know.
Hey,
I think I may have scared him when I.
babies are welcome, always.
Yes.
So, question. So I'm hearing a lot about funding, and I agree.
Mhm.
Why, what's the difference if the city was to go out and put something on the ballot for a property tax to fund city services versus consolidation?
Well, so I guess it depends on what the city and how they would ask. So the way the city went for the ballot measure in 2019 was that ballot measure was focused on fire and specifically funded for the fire department. So if the city decided to do that, then we would have a similar bump to what we had in 2019, and we could anticipate what that funding would be. I would say the big difference there between consolidation, though, is it is still a city election. The funds are still coming into the city. And even in 2019, when that did pass, a lot of the comments we were hearing was, well, the city's just going to play the shell game with the money. They're going to bring it in, and then they're going to, drop how much they're funding out of it from the general fund. And so I think one of the primary differences, to speak candidly, is a little bit of trust in the city as opposed to one policy board that the spending and the revenue is very transparent of where it's coming from and where it's going.
Got it. Yeah, and I don't disagree with what you're putting in front of us tonight. I was just thinking about questions we might get as to, well, why don't we just put something on the ballot for a property tax to help fund you all more? But it sounds like it's more to it than just funding. There's greater leverage with having, being part of the fire district. Is that right?
Councilor Dixon, I also would like to say that as you saw in Chuck's future growth with the budget going up to 12 million, if for some reason the consolidation didn't pass or we decided not to move forward with it, it is very likely and highly likely that we will be going to the voters and asking for probably 4 or 5 mills just to fund the future growth. So either way, I think the city residents are going to be paying more for future fire services than they are now by quite a bit.
Actually, I want to follow up because that is the exact same question I was going to ask, but I was going to ask it in a different way because essentially, yes, there's a level of service that our community does expect, and so the question in my mind is, if nothing changed, what would we need to ask the community for to support the services that we know that they expect out of our fire service? So there is that number of nothing if nothing changed. And then there's the other number of, okay, if it went to into consolidated fire service, what would that cost the community? And then, so the question is more about, if we said yes today and wished to move forward, how long will it take you to run those numbers to figure out those two kind of scenarios? Because that's, for in terms of fiscal responsibility, that's what this is driving, this is driving this. That's a key number for us and the entire community.
And I've actually, I would, as always, numbers need to be updated fairly regularly. But over the last couple of years, I have presented our oversight committee with numbers on first of all, what our strategic plan would cost in the 6 years that it looks forward, and what we would estimate as mill levy revenue scenario. So whether it's 5 mills, 6 mills, a little bit of maybe a 0.5% sales tax that was mixed in there, and impact fees. And so we do have the tools in place to just continue to tweak those numbers and dive in. And so if we are directed to move forward with that would be, those would certainly be starting points that we'd start plugging in the most recent numbers.
Yes.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick questions for you. One, in terms of the legislation passed in 2024 that allows for the imposition of an impact fee, is that authority just for fire districts, or is that also allowed for a municipality?
I believe it's just fire districts. A municipality can do it now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but okay.
But see, now I think one of the main things about implementing an impact fee is you have to have a nexus study.
Right.
And I think some of the challenges over the years, and Dan can jump in on this, is that for municipalities, if you're doing it for additional services, that nexus study becomes a little bit more challenging. Fire services is a pretty easy nexus to impact fees.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then secondly, to the extent that you're looking at coming up with or asking for kind of authority to move forward on a consolidation plan, so we say yes, how long will something like that take? I mean, in terms of, and actually getting to the point of having it in place, to the extent that you obviously have to take something to the voters, sounds like you have to set up a governance board, right? So can you walk us through?
So a couple things that we have going for us is there is a governance board already in place with the district board. There are already elected officials for their district. And we already actually have the fire department in place. We're not taking two separate fire departments and consolidating them and say, how do we get Silverthorne Fire to now work with Frisco Fire or something like that? We're already operationally one department. So our discussions have been both in the oversight committee and with the city management is that we think the best target would be an election in November of 27. And so what that would mean is that we'd still have to, while it seems far away, we'd still have to jump right on it, start talking about what exactly does this look like? What are the funding models? How do we say our messaging? I believe we'd probably hire someone for some polling services. We'd probably want to look at hiring someone for that messaging to help us get that message across, and then be ready to put in ballot language by, I think Dan was saying by next August or so would be the roughly the time frame there.
So, I mean, I guess what I'm hearing you say then really, I mean, it would be two questions, right? One, I mean, in terms of getting approval of allowing or including Steamboat in the existing fire district, and then two, the funding mechanism.
So I think, and this is where our legal minds would get together, but I believe the first question would be, are the city residents willing to be annexed into the district? That would presume that they're going to be annexed in at 9.24 mils. So then the question that I don't have the best answer for, and we were kind of going back around with, is if the decision though was to say that, well, we actually think 7 mils is enough, how exactly the district would take that to the vote. I don't know that it would need to be a vote, but they would have to bring that to their electorate and say, hey, we're actually going to lower your taxes.
It may be just the language, right? Does it say 9.4? Does it say up to? We get it right in terms of what kind of discretion there is.
No, there wouldn't be a Tabor election to impose another tax. The election in the city would just be to. Sorry, there wouldn't be a Tabor election. The tax would just be imposed by the annexation. So, you know, if the plan is to reduce the tax rate, the board doesn't need to have an election to do that. The board can just say, we're going to, you know, we're not going to impose 9 mils. We're going to impose 7 or 5 or 4.5 or whatever the number is. It gets a little more complicated if it is desirable from a political perspective to tie the board's hands, i.e. reduce its authority. In that case, maybe you do have to have an election, and how to coordinate an election of the citizens in the existing board that's a little complicated.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Those are the things that we would dive into here in the next few months.
Okay.
Any other questions for council?
Yeah, I think this is a quick question. Do you have any examples of how the other fire services have used impact fees? Because I know that, you know, for this community, I think they want people to pay for growth. And so I think that would be an attractive, you know, way of raising revenue versus over a mill levy.
Yeah, so there were a few examples of fire districts that had implemented impact fees prior to this 24 law. Once this 24 law was passed, they've been coming out of the woodwork, including Oak Creek Fire, and I believe West Route Fire just implemented that as well. The Nexus studies and the way they're doing it is there's a few different methods out there, but there are plenty of examples to look at. Typically, like kind of a flat rate for residential and then square footage for commercial type of properties. Mm-hmm.
Okay. No more questions?
President Montine, I just have one question that I haven't asked Chuck. You mentioned that to proceed, there's likely to be some consultant costs, consultants for polling, and have we looked at what that would cost either the city or the district to move forward with this? And
we haven't yet at this point.
So it's likely that would become backing for some sort of funding request from the city council to fund sort of this next effort.
Yeah, I would think so. And again, that's where you know, the oversight committee has been working well together, and I would imagine that they'd come up with a plan of action and a proposal that they would be both bringing back to their boards is the way I would envision that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chuck.
Mm-hmm.
Now we'll open it up to public comment. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to come up and make a public comment? You have 3 minutes. You'd state your name and address.
Chuck, can you actually stop the sharing of your screen so that we can get?
I apologize. I lost my baby support team, but I'm going to power through. My name is Brian McGovern. I'm actually a resident in the district, but I'm the president of the Steamboat Springs Professional Firefighters. I represent the professional firefighters who serve this community every day. I'm here tonight to express our support of fire service consolidation. We believe that consolidation is an important step towards strengthening fire and EMS services to the residents of Steamboat Springs and the surrounding area. Our community continues to grow, particularly with the expansion of urban housing projects and increased residential density. As the development evolves, it is important that fire and emergency services are positioned to effectively plan for these changes and provide consistent, reliable protection. A consolidated fire service allows for unified planning and a coordinated approach that enhances the safety of the firefighters and improves the service levels that we can provide to the community. Along with our local support, we bring the support of the Colorado Professional Firefighters Association and the International Association of Firefighters. And as Chief Sarasoli pointed out, these entities kind of bring many layers of support, not only financially, but they live through this on a day-to-day basis. They have teams. I had a meeting with one of the teams yesterday, and we talked about the strategic planning of something like this going towards a consolidation of the services. They also bring the financial help too. As Mr. Leeson was explaining, there could be some financial aspects. The CPFF, which is the Colorado Professional Firefighters, they have avenues for grants for the locals such as us that we can access for just this. The local group also has a specific political account that we, as the members, have put towards that we can put into play for this situation as well. As you move forward with the discussion on consolidation, we believe that this is the appropriate direction for fire and EMS services in Steamboat Springs and the Steamboat Springs Area Fire Protection District. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Is there anybody else who'd like to make public comment in the audience? Come on down.
You guys just can't get rid of me.
Who is this?
I don't know.
What's your name?
Feels like I've been here sometime before. I'm not going to waste a lot of time here, but a little bit of history, because I go back a fair ways with this whole issue, starting with the Fire EMS Funding Committee, of which I was a happy member. We spent a lot of time trying to figure out what kind of mill levy we could actually recommend back to council based upon the obvious problem between residential rates and commercial rates. And we ended up with that 2 mill levy. We knew at the time that that wasn't close to enough to adequately fund this fire department, but it was the rate that we had guessed, hoped would pass. To my surprise, it did. To my great surprise, it did with a very large percentage. I honestly don't remember what it was. I want to say 60, 65%. Tom, I don't know if you remember. People support the fire department. That makes it an easier ask than almost anything else you might come up with in terms of a tax. So that's the good part of it. The hard part is not asking for enough. The hard part now is with what we have coming, and this is the first time I have seen our fire chief come up here and tell the council, we really don't have enough money to do what needs to be done going forward. That's to me, that's pretty shocking to hear, because that's not how the fire department in this community has presented itself. It has always been, we will make whatever you allot to us work. And what we're hearing now is different, and I hope you're all paying attention to that. And that, I think, is about all I want to say, except, well, one more thing. When you go and ask the public for a consolidated fire department, you are getting rid of the other big problem that we had all those years ago, which is the total distrust in city council's ability to properly manage funding. Now, I don't happen to believe that's true. I can't think why I wouldn't agree with it, but that is still out there. That is still a mentality in this city City council just wastes money. They don't know how to spend money. The city doesn't know how to make a budget. And without answering that, if you can avoid that by talking about a consolidated fire district, you're going to make the battle easier. That's about it. I'm kind of for this. Thanks.
Thank you, Joella. Okay, is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to come up and make a public comment? Okay, seeing none, and I will look online. Is there anybody online? If you'd like to make a public comment, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none, we will close. Randall, you want to come up?
Don't be shy.
You know? Last but not least,
there's an obligation. coming.
Randall Hanaway, the president of the fire district. I was just going to add a couple things. Back in '98 is when we built the Grand Hotel, the hospital, and redid the high school. Those projects combined were about just under 200 million. The Grand was 80 million. What's on the books right now for the next 4 years is about 1.5 billion in new construction. And the delta between where we were then and how far we've come and how much we're going to grow in the next 5 to 7 years, it's compounded numerous times. On the call out, I was going to bring up to Councilman Switek, it's probably been 5 years ago, but we had a local who came in and talked to council about just this. He was 18 seconds. He was the second call, and he had a heart attack on House and Hill. The third call came in 18 seconds later. If they had responded to the third call first, he wouldn't have made it. So it's getting to be a real issue. And we're open as the district. We were a little hurt last time. We spent a lot of money to drive down that road, I think $70,000, $80,000. So we only want to do it if the city is all in. And the problem is you don't really know if you're all in until you go through the process and figure out if it's doable. Like I wish we could say, yeah, we can do it for 6 or 7 mills and we could lower the county and raise the city, or we don't know what that would look like. It would take some people to really dig into the finances and see what the best instruments are for implementing that. But just know that we're supportive. We think it's inevitable. That's the reason why everybody else you're starting to see this happen more and more commonly. And fortunately, we have he's a great attorney in terms of districts. I think he manages about 65 of the districts in Colorado. So he's extremely knowledgeable about helping us kind of put that together and what it would look like and how to do it, because we certainly aren't aware of it. And one thing I will bring up, and hopefully I'm wrong, but Chuck brought a bunch of people up last fall and we met and we learned all about these consolidation and authorities. And almost to a person, every person said, however long you think it'll take 2 or 3 times longer than you think. Most of the people, I think it took them between 6 and 8 years. So I would hope that we could do much better than that, but I think we'll be forced to. So hope that helps.
Thank you, Randall.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else want to, last call for public comment? Okay, seeing none in the room and seeing no hands raised online, we will close public comment. Bring it back to council to discuss the 2 questions for tonight. And we don't have them up on you want to put them up there, Chuck. But the first one was, would the council like to further explore fire department consolidation?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
I think we're unanimous on yes. Is that a definitive enough answer?
I think I got
Okay.
You got that? Okay. And the second question, if yes, is the Fire Oversight Committee the best fit to take the lead?
Yes.
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 Let me write that down.
Doesn't quite happen like that all the time.
Appreciative.
But thank you. And good luck on moving forward on this.
Looking forward to help, whatever we can do to help you out. We clearly, getting out to the public. And that's something that as a leader and a council moving forward to expedite what Randall said about 6 to 8 years, how can we as a council lead our community into understanding some of this, not just the newspaper and PIOs, or what could we do? And so I don't know the answer to that. It's just more like, give us the information more than at the time of decision-making that could help us get this to the community better. As you're going and as the oversight is talking to other communities and how they've done this and orchestrated a consolidation, what do they wish you did instead? Start asking that question, bring that information back to us. Make that part of your strategy that we would like to help out with. At least I would.
I will chime in though. What we can do is stand unanimously, the 7 of us, behind a mill levy if we are going to pursue this.
Amen.
And we don't individually splinter off when the pressure increases.
Thank you. Good point.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well put. All right. Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you.
We're going to be seeing you in about another 5 seconds, so don't go too far.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone from the fire department and the district
being here.
board. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for your service and thanks for your work.
Okay, our second work session topic is the City of Steamboat Springs Emergency Operations Plan. Chuck, you're on again.
Back. And I think my technology's working. Okay. Hopefully this one will be a little bit lighter discussion, really for this topic. I'm really here. We do have a few questions and some guidance that we'd like from you after this conversation, but primarily this is going to be informative as to what the emergency operation plan is, where it came from, and what council's role would be in that as well. And so tonight we're going to talk about what an emergency operation plan is, and it really creates a framework that guides how the city prepares for and responds to and recovers from emergencies and large incidents, disasters. Really, this falls under a couple of strategic plan outcome areas of certainly safe community and high performance government. So the questions we'll revisit it at the end are certainly any questions that you might have about the plan, how we're going to proceed for it. One of the things I will say is this is a draft plan right now. There are a few things we're going to ask from you and a few other things that still need to be completed for the plan. But I do anticipate that by mid-year, June, July, we'll be coming back for potential adoption of the plan. And then it will be a moving plan, a forever growing plan that we always are revisiting, changing, updating as we experience things and move forward. What kind of training might council be interested in regards to your role in responding to disasters as well as in this plan? And then we have a couple of specific guidance questions. One is regarding emergency spending authority and some of the things that we've discussed with the finance director and the city manager as far as and legal about moving forward with that. And then a little bit of direction on continuity of government and how we'll take the next steps. So why did we come up, why did we feel the emergency operation plan mattered? Obviously, emergencies occur with little warning. So therefore, preparation is key. And one thing I will say is that a few years ago, the city manager at the time had come to leadership one day and said, I'd reached out and I'd asked for our emergency plan, and he kind of presented all of us with what that emergency plan was. And what it really looked like more was individual departments thinking about what they would do in an emergency and not as much of a cohesive plan. And so city manager Tom Leeson really, when we discussed this, when he came on board as city manager, recognized that that really wasn't a plan and that we wanted to move forward with a cohesive framework on how we would address that. So that's really where this was born from. And we looked at other communities, some of the other options and opportunities that were available to us and felt this was the best way for the city to move forward. So obviously large incidents can overwhelm us pretty quickly, particularly if we're not prepared for it. And And they may quickly move into multi-jurisdictional situations, even though the incident might still be primarily within Steamboat Springs. So an EOP, as we'll refer to, ensures that list of items. Really, what's everybody's role? Organizing a unified command structure, making sure we're using our resources and other resources efficiently, how we continue in situations where maybe council can't convene to make emergency ordinances and that sort of thing, and then how do we recover better on the tail end of emergencies. So what's in the EOP? Assuming you all at least glance through it, we talk about identifying hazards. The county undergoes and reevaluates a hazard mitigation plan every year. That's referenced in this. We weren't going to reinvent the study on what those hazards are, and they're no surprise to us. Wildfire is one of our biggest hazards. We also have flooding risks, severe weathers on that list. But then there's also some man-made hazards that we need to think about as well. Technological terrorism, right? IT incidents, hazardous materials, spills, that sort of things that also might generate an emergency. One of the other things that I like to bring up a lot is even a water main break would be something that would activate this team to some degree to help our city make sure that people are notified if people aren't able to drink water, or how we will supply them with water or whatever it might be. So even incidents at that scale are what we are imagining with this plan. We identify critical facilities, and really the main point of that is a good reference for us to look at and say, hey, this emergency is happening here. Let's look at our list of critical facilities and make sure we're not missing any. And then access and functional needs, there's a discussion on that about how we help those community members either evacuate if they need to, make sure that they're on public warnings like Route County alerts or Community Connect and that sort of stuff. It outlines our emergency declaration process. So we're not doing that last minute and trying to remind ourselves, hey, how does this happen? Can we do it? Is it the city manager that can do it? Do we need counsel? What's the form we have? So it has a template that we've run by legal for our situation and kind of outlines how that process would be. And then obviously we're sort of adding a little bit of another layer of emergency spending process. So the concept of operations is that the city would initiate, any response level at the lowest level. So let's use wildfire as an example. That if we have a small wildland fire start up on Woodchuck Hill on a windy day, obviously the fire department's going to be first response. We're going to get out there, and if we can handle the incident, we take care of the incident. If it turns into a high wind day and embers are flowing and the grass is taking off and we're starting to have structures threatened and we're starting to see the need for evacuations, this would kick in the emergency operations plan. So more than likely, the fire department would stay as incident command, but it would bring together the rest of our team, and we would be able to start making decisions in the framework of incident command structure and national incident management. So ICS and the city's response team would be activated at whatever level that might be. The example I gave you before of a water main break might result in the public works director, and their organization is going to take care of the water break, but we still need the public information to get involved. If we're going to be spending money outside of our budget, we want to make sure finance is aware and we have the ability to do that. So it's a scalable system. And then really what we talk about in this plan is, well, what happens when it gets beyond our resources and the city's resources aren't going to cut it anymore? And we're contemplating money that we would need to be reimbursed by state emergency funds or whatnot. Now we start getting in the county emergency Office of Emergency Management. Their EOP and their EOC will kick into effect. They'll be helping support us through the event. And then obviously that can continue to go to state and federal levels if that's the way the situation goes. So it's activated when an event occurs. It's then moving into an actual emergency declaration. That's something that the city manager can initiate, and then that would last for 7 days. and we would then need council to act. We saw that in COVID. That was another good example of when this actually played out for us. Why would we do a declaration? Obviously, that would activate our EOP, but it would also easily allow the county's EOP to ramp up and get involved and then bring in potential state money and state resources. So we want to be able to get on that declaration quickly. It would enable resources and funding, and then the governing board, as yourself, would need to continue it past 7 days. So the incident command structure, which this is predicated on, really provides that list of items. So the unified command structure, what we find is when we don't have a command structure, we have people that are sort of all doing their own thing, and nobody's talking to each other, and they're all doing what they think they should be doing, but maybe not under the direction and no understanding of the incident command. So it really brings that all together. It defines a clear chain of command, a manageable span of control, so no one person is trying to navigate 12, 20 people underneath them, because we know that doesn't work. Everybody knows their role coming in, and that's one of the things that we've been training on as leadership team, is defining our roles, and we're going to be diving into a little bit more of this is going to be your role when you show up. This is going to be your role when you show up. And then it creates an accountability system, which is important. And communications is the other big aspect of that. One of the things we know goes wrong in larger events, that's one of the top items that we talk about after every one of them, is how did the communications work? So the primary command center that we have identified in this plan is the Pa'achipi room. And that's a room so that's like initially where we would respond if we feel we need a physical presence. That being said, incident command likely would be somewhere else. Incident command might end up being over in the fire department conference room, and then the policy decisions or the policy group would actually maybe go in Kitten Creek. Because what we don't want is all those people surrounding incident command trying to provide them information and input. So you as policy group would also be there with liaisons. So for instance, if it was a school event, God forbid, something like a school shooting, we would want the superintendent of schools or someone that understands the school's plans with you in that policy room. And then the city manager in that case would be working as the liaison between the council, folks like that. Maybe if it's a water event, we have Mount Werner Water there. And then they would Tom would be making sure that the information is getting to incident command appropriately. Information flow in that sense is ideal, but also information flow out to the public. What we don't want is a lot of people trying to tell the public what to do. It has to be coordinated through our public communication process, and incident command needs to know what's going out and really signs off on everything that gets released to the public. And then obviously there'd be coordination with the EOC like I've talked about. This is what that structure looks like, probably very familiar for folks that know incident ICS at all. But as you can see, the public information officer, the safety officer, and that liaison officer are really part of the command staff. They're really kind of right there with incident command. And then the other section chiefs would be in our command center, and they would be working on their roles together. The idea is not to have people working in bubbles, but we just want to make sure that the communication is in a structured format. So real quick, those are all the sections. Obviously, incident command is overseeing the whole event. Incident command does not necessarily have to be an expert in whatever the incident is. They just really need to know how to run an incident command system and understand the information that's coming to them. Operations, however, is when you get into experts of what you're doing. They're the boots on the ground fixing the problem. So that's where most of incidents will just have incident command and operations, and will hopefully be able to manage most incidents that way. You might, as I said, bring in a logistics or a finance person to help, and then it can be scalable as you go. Planning is in charge of understanding what the incident's objectives are, how we're going to manage that incident objectives, and creating an incident action plan for the operational period, whether it's 12 hours, 24 hours, 8 hours. Logistics is in charge of getting things. So not only the resources, So more than likely, operations already got our mutual aid folks, like in a fire situation. We've already got fire engines there. But what we might need are additional law enforcement officers beyond what we have staffed in our district to help with evacuations. So if we're needing 5 more officers and patrol cars, logistics would say, okay, let's see if Grand County can help us out. How do we get them here? And then they're bouncing that off finance to say, hey, we're going to order 5 patrol officers. We think it'll cost this much. Finance, can we do that? And finance gives that nod. Finance also works on tracking everybody's expenditures to make sure we're dialed in for potential reimbursement and making sure we're following our spending rules and our spending authority. I mentioned PIO and then you folks as policy groups. So when it comes to this emergency spending authority, this is one of the questions we have for you tonight. The current language in the charter for emergency spending would require council to come together and make an emergency appropriations for spending. What the county does and what we discussed is we might not have the time and luxury to reach out, make sure council gets together and makes that emergency appropriations in time for what we might be trying to make spend money on. So for instance, a pre-approval for a contract for a vendor to set up sheltering, vendor to bring in portalets for that, road closures and evacuations, right? So what we're proposing, and this was, Kim had reached out to the county on this one, we came up with language similar to what they have that would allow pre-declaration spending limits of $10,000 per single purchase for a total of $100,000 for a single event without pre-approval from the city manager or the city council. That would be through the incident command. More than likely, they're talking to city manager saying, hey, we're moving down this road, but a fast-moving wildfire would require fast decisions and potentially a lot of resource ordering. And then any additional funds beyond that, the city manager would request through city council through an emergency ordinance. So the hope is we would buy us some time prior to having to get council together to at least start taking actions right away. The plan ensures essential government functions continue during the event. So this is also an area we're looking for a little bit of guidance, and I apologize, there was a couple kind of conflicting slide and emergency operation plan that Councilman Augusta noticed. But what the 2 things we're focused on here with continuity of government is 1, your roles as the governing body. What if, and COVID was a good example of this, what if 5 of you were bedridden with COVID and could not get out of bed and we needed council to convene and pass an emergency ordinance? What happens in that case? How do we get that passed? So what is the continuity of government from that standpoint? The other one would be, and particularly in positions like the city manager, is he's listed in that position in particular is listed in the charter as having many authorities in our case with Tom. What happens if he can't do those? What happens if he's bedridden or unable to come and make those decisions? It's obvious that we first would move to probably the deputy city manager, but what happens beyond that? And so we want to contemplate those things ahead of time and have them in an emergency operation plan so that we can take quick action. This was an example. What I will say is I believe where we've landed with the continuity of government is that Dan will be reaching out to you with some draft language and some ideas to convene the next steps on how we want to write this into the plan. So we won't get into too many of these slides because they really just say what I just mentioned is, if the city manager isn't there, like this might be a list we would see. So deputy city manager, finance director, public works director, just kind of going through our leadership team at that point. So a big part of this is communication. Now the county has a communication plan. We're not going to rewrite a whole communication plan, but one of the things we do have in this that will be an appendix is a crisis communication plan that helps our communication team understand a little bit ahead of time who they might be needing to reach out to, how they might do that, through what channels, and that sort of thing. Now, we'll be utilizing the Routt County Communication Center for things like emergency notification, evacuation notifications, that sort of thing, as well as response communications. And then on a larger incident, you would actually ramp up your information center into what's called a JIC, or a Joint Information Center. And then there's constant review of this plan. How are we doing when we're running exercises, when we're actually doing events? What I would anticipate is I would really push our team to think about implementing this even on smaller situations, so that we can all practice and get into that sort of thing. So we would update it, or look at every time we do an exercise or an incident, and then we would support it with training. And so that's not only for our team, but as the time goes on, I would see us diving deeper into the deputies and the other folks within our organization, as well as council. We do have, just as a side note, we actually have a planned exercise this November that is actually being sponsored through the Routt County Office of Emergency Management, where we'll be doing a simulation that would affect the city quite dramatically, that we'll take on, and I'll give you more information as we move on. I don't know what roles everyone will have, so I don't want to give away the end game now. So obviously, the EOP ultimately protects residents, provides clear authority and structure, enhances that coordination, hopefully results in a better and more efficient response, and supports community recovery. So as I mentioned, some of the actions are, we will be looking for the nod and some direction on those two topics to come back to you with a completed plan for adoption later on in the year. I would like to convene a training that the Office of Emergency Management does for elected officials. So I'd like to get that on your radar for later on this year. And it really talks about what your role is in emergencies and in disasters in your community. And then we would continue to work with our regional partners, particularly OEM, for this fall exercise. And in the meantime, as we continue our training as leadership team, we're going to be plugging away at some smaller scenarios and seeing how it works. So now we're back to those questions.
Okay. Thank you, Chuck.
Yeah.
Thank you. Nice to see you twice tonight.
Yes, I know. It's maybe too much of me in one evening.
So what questions?
Just try to help me understand just a little bit. I totally agree. Everything we did was fantastic. How does Mo fit into this, and explain to me a little bit more detail about his role in the county, and then how does.
Yeah, so the county really, so some municipalities, and typically smaller municipalities, might actually just adopt the county's emergency operation plan as theirs. What that does, though, and what I've learned over the years in working with the county and with the city, is that oftentimes it's not that we're not on the same page, but we're not on the same understanding of how things would flow. And so this is a good attempt to get the city sort of speaking the same language as the county in their emergency operations, so that when we need additional help, we're able to reach out for it, and we're then talking the same language. Now, where does the county come into play? Typically, the county will come into play as soon as we've gone beyond our ability resource-wise to manage an incident. So on a fire, and particularly a wildland fire, I will say that happens pretty quick. Everything I just told you earlier comes into play very quickly. If we have a fire that is fast-moving, we don't have the resources to stop it. So if it's close to structures or a population, we are very quickly changing our approach to saying, how do we get people out of the way? And the fire is going to do what the fire is going to do. But we've immediately said, we've gone out of our resources. We now are going to bring the county in. And when they agree to take over the incident, they agree to take over the financing of the incident. Now, it doesn't mean that they're going to take over incident command, or all of a sudden our resources are gone and the county has resources. It just means that they're taking over the responsibility of that event. So that happens differently for every event. But then their emergency operations plan kicks in. Now, they have a couple of different things. They have a Type 4 incident management team that could help out on an incident. actually manage it depending on our situation, but they also can stand up their emergency operations center. The Emergency Operations Center is actually a group of people, some of which our leadership team participates in, that are experts in their field, and they each have an emergency support function or an ESF. And that team, that EOC, is designed to help the management team do what they need to do. So when I mentioned logistics and Incident Command says, hey, we're going to evacuate these 5 blocks, let's set up a shelter. Our logistics is going to be like, well, I don't know, like, what do I need to set up a shelter? That's when they would turn to Mo's team and his EOC and say, hey, we need sheltering. What do you guys have in place? Who do you have that can help us? And then their Emergency Operations Center would make sure that we get what we need. So they're really a support for us up to a certain point, and then they either take over fiscal responsibility, or it might be a cost share, right? It might be that they're saying, look, this is still largely on city property. Let's come up with a cost share of how this will work.
And now, is this currently, they have an EOP, we don't? So right now, we're depending on them for the whole county and the city for an incident, or?
Yes and no. I mean, their EOP, they come into play when we ask them.
Okay.
So currently, or I'd say a year prior to this, an event might happen. We would find ourselves trying to figure out how to manage it. And then at some point, we probably would have said, hey, Mo, can you help us out with standing up your EOC?
Gotcha. Okay.
Yes. Brian.
So just to make sure I'm understanding correctly, page 16 of the document, section 2.2, that is what triggers, that's like what triggers all of this, right? So it says a local disaster may be declared by the principal executive officer, and that means Tom. So Tom would be the one who makes that call. That's what triggers all of this.
Well, that's the disaster declaration.
Okay.
So what would trigger this could be that water main leak. And so John's people discover a water main that's going to affect a whole neighborhood, hundreds of people. And they're like, oh, this is a big deal. Like, we need to get messaging out, whatever. So they contact John, and John realizes right off the bat, hey, this is a big deal. Yes, my crew can handle the water break itself, but I think we should get the team together to talk about how to message this, how we get people notified of it, if we do need resources, if additional spending needs to be made. So really, the EOP, the plan and the incident response team, as it's in the document, can be activated by any one of us. What I say anyone on leadership team easily, but that would probably come from some of our people. So I could easily see my crew responding to a wildfire, telling me the situation, and me saying, hey, I think I should activate the EOP. Does that make sense?
This gets into 2 questions I have. One, it's easy in a binary where it's all of a sudden the entire town is on fire. But what
Yes.
about that gray area? COVID is a good example, or how I would imagine a wildfire where it seems like, is it going to happen or not? And then immediately all of a sudden it happens. How is that gray area managed? Because you don't want to call it too early, but you don't want to call it too late. Like, how do you,
Yeah.
is there any plan for that?
Well, I mean, my push is call it too early, right? Like I immediately, a wildfire is another, I'll just keep using that because that's my world, right? But immediately when we start needing resources and we start needing federal resources, which is any air resource whatsoever, all of a sudden I need to be on a whole different radio. I need my radio that I talk with our dispatch on, and physically trying to manage a situation with 2 radios in your ears is almost impossible. So I encourage all of our folks to call for help early, get everybody coming. And if we need to stand down people, or people are saying, oh, it looks like you don't need us, great. That's the best case scenario. But you're at least ready for that stand up of the next level. But you're absolutely right. The challenge is seeing the situation, anticipating might be coming, and then trying to make the call early.
So that's just part of leadership, basically.
Yep. And that's why this is a scalable system too. So the idea might be, maybe I just call Tom first and say, hey, this is the situation. What do you think? And we start having a conversation, and we're like, well, maybe we should get Kim involved. And then we reach out to her or her designee. And so now there's 3 of us. And then the situation keeps growing, and we're like, let's get the whole team in here. So, that's the way it would go.
Okay. And then my second question, this is pretty far-fetched. I trust all of you, but we've seen wilder things happen. We're seeing in here that how I read it, unauthorized spend up to 10,000, up to 100,000 if there's an emergency. With are there any checks on that? Like defining an emergency? Like if you think about a bad actor, right? And it's like, oh, I'm going to say this is an emergency and I need to spend this. Once again, it's a very far off scenario, but is there any kind of clear definition or something that is putting some kind of guardrails in place that could manage a potential bad actor?
No.
Okay. Good to know. Thanks.
Yep.
Well, I guess the only thing I would answer to that is it's going to be more than one person, right? Because if someone's not going to be able to go spend $10,000 without probably going to finance and saying, I need this money, we need to allocate this money somehow. So it's not likely to be an individual that's making that decision. Now, could you get more than one bad actor? Absolutely. But in that scenario, you're not going to be able to spend that money most likely with just one person making that decision.
And, I think the other key is it's who we bring on the organization and how we all act in our organization, right? Like that's really the big check and balance for me.
I won't make it political, but I think you get where I'm going. Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions?
So I want to start off by saying thank you, for putting this together. And you and I have talked about my thing about emergency evacuation plan. We didn't have that. This and that's a small piece to this whole big picture. And I recognize that, and I recognize that this was a hole, and it's a really important hole for us to fill, especially with the nervousness that we have coming into this next year. So I basically want to say thank you, and given that in a month, we could potentially have what we're all scared about, this coming year. What do we need to do to make sure that if it does come that soon, I know you're in a draft mode right now, but are there certain things like, and I think you had one of the questions up there, and that maybe the one thing you need is basically, and some ordinance to say, hey, during a declared emergency, we have these funds.
It's a good question. My guess is that until we formally adopt this, that emergent spending kind of authority wouldn't take into place. We'd be using the current language in the charter for that. But I think, and I believe in the charter, there is a provision that says we can do what we need to do to save life and property from disaster. And that's sort of the understanding we, at least in my world, work under all the time. But I think maybe to address your other broader question is, if something happened next week, I actually believe we could implement this to a degree with the understanding that we all already have on our leadership team without the formal adoption.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm going to say, I don't think maybe speaking on behalf of myself and probably all of council, is we certainly wouldn't want that technicality to get in the way.
Amen.
Right? I mean, we know that we need to be ready at any moment in time. And so again, applaud the work that you've done. But I think we're ready to do whatever we need to do to make sure that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, but we don't have to wait for that if unfortunately something happens.
Do you have any kind of, what thinking have you done about educating the public around this?
Around the emergency operation plan?
Mm-hmm.
It just so happens we have an article coming to the newspaper about this.
Okay.
And really kind of summarizing just what I did and a lot of what the communication form has in it.
And I was even thinking,
The monthly column that we talked about.
we'll put that in there, but I was thinking that even, when we bring some of this stuff like to the farmer's market where we have some like brochures and stuff on things or posters, boards and stuff, this might be something that would,
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I think we certainly can work with our communications department and Mike with that. Because one of the things in the plan, which we continually struggle to get the word out and people signed up for, is Route County Alerts. And Route County Alerts is not only a notification platform, but it also has the ability for folks to enter medical needs, mobility needs, whatever it might be, so that if we evacuate a region, we can actually pull up and be flagged for some of those things. So the more people that get registered for that, the better.
Okay. Any other questions for Chuck?
Yeah, I have some questions. Yep, it's on. So ditto for all the work putting this together. In my prior career, I actually lived in these types of plans, unfortunately.
I'll tap into that.
Yes, and we had to activate the incident command system several times, and once for an active shooter,
Right.
and then hostage situation. So it's really important to have these plans in place, and for folks to understand their role. And so I think for council, to me, that is the most important thing that we have to nail down, that we need to understand our role and that we're all not calling Tom or you or anyone trying to get information. That will wreck the whole plan. So totally support it. So now I'm getting to my technical questions.
Okay.
And this might be for Dan. And if you don't know, it's totally fine. Back to Brian's comment about 2.2 disaster declaration. We reference state statute in here. When I looked that up, that statute, it really seemed like it was not any staff person that falls in that definition. I could be wrong, but I just don't want to bind ourselves with a state statute about the principal executive officer of a political subdivision. I just want to make sure we're really clear. And that if it truly does say any staff person, I'm good. When I read it, that's not how I read it. Again, we don't have to resolve it tonight. Just want to flag it. And then since this is a living document, at the beginning of it, and since we also were talking about the financial aspect, which I support and agree with, on page, I highlighted it, let me find it here. Page 5, approval and implementation. And again, this is not a concern, Tom, with you. Anytime that we're referencing council, any type of financial commitment or agreement, the one sentence that gave me pause was the last sentence in the first paragraph. That the city manager essentially can make formal notification, can modify the plan without formal notification or adoption by city council. I don't know. That just, again, I don't have concerns, but when I'm thinking about policy perspective and we're talking about our role as council and we have money in here, that just, I think we should talk about that. Whether we talk about it tonight or if you all want to go back and talk about it, I'm okay with that as well. I think that those two may have been my only comments in here. And actually, I will.
I would just say to that last comment, I think maybe we could discuss modifying it to something about significant modifications. Because I think what we want to try to avoid is every little change having to come and go through the whole adoption process, right? So we do want to be able to make some tweaks and twists here and there without full adoption, but maybe
Yeah, I
find
totally
a
agree.
good balance with that language.
Yeah, I totally agree about that. Let's see here. I think, okay, do you mind going to page 20, 3.3, the liaison and or policy group? Maybe just talk about a little bit more about that, what that looks like. If you're able to, I don't mean to put you on the spot.
3.3?
Yes.
So the idea of the policy group really ultimately is getting liaisons for the incident. So like I said, either school superintendents, water managers, or policymakers like council together for an opportunity for you to say, here are our concerns. Here's the direction that the incident commander is going to want to go. They want to do this or that or the other thing. you're able to say, well, we're concerned about this or that, or if we're maybe taking getting close to the edge of a policy that we're uncomfortable with or a direction, that's the opportunity for those folks to as policy makers to step in and say, hey, we'd rather see us do this or that. Or the liaison aspect is making sure that we're not missing anything and experts can get their information to Incident.
Great. Okay, thanks. Yeah,
I get-
it's perfect. Yeah,
All right.
thank you.
Yep.
All right, as long as we're diving in a little bit. No, that's okay. I also had highlighted kind of under the city charter, section 7.7, emergency ordinances. And I think it's more just from the perspective of clarity, right? I mean, in terms of, looking at that, approved by a majority vote of council members present at any meeting. I mean, to the extent that we don't want to have questions about what the authority is and who has the authority, does that mean there has to be a quorum, right? I mean, so, again, kind of talking about from the perspective of you're in an emergency situation, you have no idea where everybody is. Just, kind of clarity.
Sorry, I missed your,
just
the emergency operation plan or in the charter you're referencing?
Well, it says it's city charter, it's under the 3.3 liaison emergency, it's in there, city charter 7.7 emergency ordinances. So
Gotcha.
my only point is just, I think as we look through this, just making sure that there's real clarity in terms of, does that mean you have to have a quorum? I mean, I assume so, but I don't know, right? So,
And I think that's going to go a little bit to the continuity of government discussion about, well, what if you can't get a quorum? Then what happens?
right. So again, that's what I just assume, just as we read through this, making sure that it's as clear as it can be in terms of what authority and what are the conditions.
Well, that is a charter provision, and we can't change that without having an election.
So, but does that mean, right, majority of vote of council members? I mean, so that's interesting, right?
So there is a quorum provision in the charter that applies to emergency ordinances, if that's what you're asking.
Okay. So I think it would, so you're saying there would have to be a quorum?
For council to adopt an emergency ordinance, yes, you would have to have a quorum.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, I mean, that makes sense, but and then just understanding how that all flows through in this from an implementation perspective.
Well, I think that's one of the points of this presentation tonight is if we can't get a quorum of council together because of an emergency situation, that's a real problem because there are certain things that only council can do. And there is some council authority to delegate and provide for continuity of government. But, big picture, we just can't, the city manager can't adopt an ordinance. So these are things that will need to be addressed. And one question you may end up having to answer is, do you want to change the charter so that we can, anticipate like a real serious emergency that comes on quickly enough that council doesn't have time to react?
Yeah, you just think of East Troublesome, right? And the chaos that was happening in terms of the people leaving Grand Lake, not leaving Grand Lake, right? I mean, when you're trying to evacuate and you don't have communication or know where everybody is. So I guess that's the question is, would the continuity of governance cure for that?
To some extent, yes.
So I think we recognize that that's this discussion we started having and we're diving into. And I think, and I'm looking at the two of you guys to help me, but I think the plan is that we'll get together and contemplate some of these things and have probably reach out to council with clarification on how we want to proceed, whether it's actually a charter amendment or if it's something regarding continuity of government in here that covers it or not.
And I think we've kind of jumped into some of the council questions piece.
Yep.
But before we go too far, let's just open this up to public comment real quick. Is there anybody in the room who would like to make a public comment? Or anyone online who'd like to make a public comment, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none, we will close public comment and bring it back to council to answer your questions, which I think we've kind of delved into a couple of them. But the first one really is, are there any questions or clarifications regarding the plan, which is kind of what we've been doing for a bit. Is there any other questions or clarifications about the plan?
Are these appropriate questions for us to be digging into, or as part of this, you're just informing us and saying, we're going to continue mulling over these concerns that you have. And we'll be back.
So I think, I think the big one really is, the feedback on emergency spending, I guess that's one of the questions. If you'd, if the language that's currently in there is sufficient, or if you would like some clarifications or modifications to that.
Sufficient. I think
Okay.
it's fine. I think my big concern is just talking through this like conflict between the charter and reality and thinking that through and potentially, not to speak for council, but recommending to us if there should be a charter amendment if we are worried.
So for that last one we just discussed, what we'll do is, city manager, the city attorney, and myself will get together to contemplate some language and figure out how we message that back and forth with council. So really the big question then is, and I saw you all nodding when we were talking about it before, is are you interested in training at some point this year on council's role in an emergency?
Yes.
All right, and so we'll coordinate that through Teresa probably. And
Yeah, the way you have this document written, and the way we talked about it was it's essentially adopted by the city manager. And so that's a question whether this would be coming back for adoption, which is addressing Councilor Dixon's question about, what changes can be made by the city manager. Because if it's adopted by the city manager, ultimately the city manager would also make changes. But I'm wondering, since there's a provision of funding in the emergency funding, if that particular section could be exempted from the city manager's approval. In other words, the city manager can adopt this, but can't make any changes to the funding because ultimately any funding decision has to be.
Right.
And maybe that addresses your concern.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Does Kim want to make a?
I just wanted, Kim Weber, Finance Director, I did want to clarify that any emergency spending on the $100,000 will also be a part of the annual budget process. So the city manager couldn't change that to $500,000 without council approval because you will have to approve it as part of the budget process. So he or she could change it to $500,000, but it's only good if you've appropriated it.
Yeah, and I suspect Councilor Swintek's concern was more that it wasn't really an emergency and we went out and spent $100,000 on something that we wanted a new truck or something, right? And so I think that was probably more.
That was the angle that I was coming at, yes.
Right.
The other thing I would say on this continuity of governance thing, I guess the question for me is always, what's the worst case scenario? And make sure that we can account for that.
Right.
Whatever that is.
Yeah, it's always tough when we dive into those a little bit because sometimes we get so far into the worst case scenario that we're like, seriously? Like we're contemplating this?
Well, I think, but from
believe me, that's my world. So yeah, I think that's a good point. And that's really where we were going a little bit with it, I would say, is what happens if 7 council members can't show up? 6 council members can't show up.
This is an interesting work session topic. I was on council 3 months, 4 months, and then COVID hit. And, experiencing the leadership role from a citizen to have to be in this seat up here, cutting budgets 20%, that's kind of the limit. But what we also realized was that the county had a lot more leadership role. Jason Lacey was president at the time, and we really, because we were just the city within the county, it was a kind of different deal. But I know the deer in the headlight look for all 7 of us was like, what is our role in this whole thing, right? The shutdown and the citizens and everything else. So, I mean, it's great to have this conversation on a city level, not just the county level, so that we can continue to be good leaders and know that, it's part of our own orientation that we hopefully don't have to use this. But at least if we do, we know our roles. And I think that's highly successful.
Okay, any other comments for Chuck? 2 great presentations tonight. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
One more question. What room is the primary command center in again?
You just want me to say it? They all know I cannot say. Wish it was the Smith room.
Yeah, spell it then. If you can't say it, you have to spell it.
And I just wanted to follow up on kind of the last comment you made, Tom. I mean, in terms of the intention here is that this is really a manager-approved document and not necessarily a council-approved? And just maybe talk me through the rationale.
Well, and I actually have that, I do have that highlighted for discussion as well, because there's a statement, and unfortunately I just closed my computer. There is a statement at the beginning that talks about either adoption by the council or city manager. That is something we can discuss. Right now, it's a city manager approved document. And so when we talked about council adopting it, I don't know if that, maybe that wasn't exactly what we were envisioning. So I think maybe that could be another conversation we just throw back to council to make sure everyone's on the same page.
I think that's worthy of a conversation. I mean, and I think it kind of goes back to that other comment that we were talking about in terms of changes, right? I mean, in the sense of giving some sort, giving the flexibility needed in the document, but I think it's worthy of a discussion in terms of just understanding the distinction.
So Chuck, timeframe on when we might hear back from you on this?
So we're pretty far along on this, especially with the little bit of guidance, and we'll jump on the continuity of government. I think that's really the outstanding one. And then I'm actually pretty close on the evacuation plan too, which I really want to include in this. Although I could see moving forward with this plan and the appendices that we have in place, and then filling in with the evacuation plan once it's complete. We're working with the county on dialing in evacuation zones. And then creating our city document on evacuation routes and how we would potentially handle that. So we're kind of at the tail end of that discussion with our city evacuation plan. So I think by June, we should probably have this to a point where we're ready to go.
Will those evacuation plans include Stone Lane?
Oh, God.
Just kidding, just kidding.
Their routes,
Gravity, come on,
the
yeah.
evacuation routes currently exist as roads.
I know. It doesn't exist, so.
All right.
How do you improve it?
Are we good? Everyone?
Big
Okay,
guys.
thank you, Chuck. Have a good night.
It's a work session, but
Anything else?
we had a regular meeting, so we need to adjourn.
Oh, we do need to adjourn,
We are going
according
to
to our council.
Oh, move to adjourn?
motion to adjourn, yes?
Yes, move to
Yes.
adjourn.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Good.
We are adjourned.
Thank you.
You're at 10 o'clock.